Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now, here's the thing, because when it comes to Ultimate X-Men, in my last video, I had said like, hey, we are officially done with Mark Millar's run on Ultimate X-Men. And so now we're moving on to Brian Michael Bendis' run. Now, when it comes to Brian Michael Bendis, the dude only had 2 story arcs, and that was really it. But for me personally, the 2 story arcs are really great. And so I love the idea of me sitting back down and going back over Ultimate X-Men once again. Now, when it comes to Blockbuster, this was my first story arc for Ultimate X-Men. Like, if I remember correctly, I was at Barnes and Noble and my dad found the collection, the trade for this one particular story arc. And I sat down, read the whole entire thing. And I was kind of like, oh my God, I like Ultimate X-Men. I gotta get more. So of course I did. And now I have the whole entire series. But anyways though, let's go ahead and dive into Blockbuster, Brian Michael Bendis' first Ultimate X-Men story. And so as we get into the opening pages for issue number 34, we do pick up with Logan. Now, this is a man right now just trying to relax because this is post Magneto, meaning that when he came to the X-Men, they stopped Magneto and he's locked away. This is Brian Michael Bendis trying to go into a different direction with the book. And so when it comes to Wolverine, this is a man right now just trying to relax and have some food at this diner. Now, a young lady does walk into the diner. She does recognize Wolverine as one of the X-Men, and she's like really excited to see him and ask him like, are you on a mission? Now for Logan, he tells her no. Now for her, she wants to offer to pay for his lunch, which of course she does. But here's the thing, because on her money, there's a note. And a note was handed over to the owner of the diner, and it tells him, get the heck out of here right now. And so right after she leaves and he leaves, a bunch of vans pull up to the diner and they just shoot up the entire place, hitting Logan all over his body. Now that lady, when she does walk over to the diner, she realized that her target, which was Logan, is no longer there. But now we have to switch over to Peter Parker. Now, for me personally, this is Brian Michael Bendis doing a callback. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it comes to Brian Michael Bendis, in the early days of Ultimate Marvel, all you had was Ultimate Spider-Man, right? But then later on, you got Ultimate Marvel Team Up. Now, the first issue in Ultimate Marvel Team Up was Peter Parker and Logan, Spider-Man, Wolverine. Of course, great book. But the thing is, at the end of that storyline, we learn here that Wolverine had followed Peter Parker back home. And so because Wolverine got shot nearby the home of the Parkers, he needs somewhere to rest to allow his healing factor to kick in and help his body recover. And so for Spider-Man, once he gets back home, goes in the basement, his room, he turns around, he realized that Logan is right now in his room. Now again, you do have Logan tell Peter how he found him and why he's here at the moment. Now, Mary Jane also walks in, and once she sees Logan, she begins to faint. Now, some time does pass by, like 2 days, because once you have Logan wake up, he's now perfectly healed up, but he's also being confronted by Mary Jane, also Peter Parker. Now, Mary Jane, she leaves. Honestly, she's out of storyline for the rest of the book. But when it comes to Peter Parker, he's kind of like, listen, I helped you, I kept you here, allow you to heal up. My aunt did not find you at all, but you gotta go before she does find you and get really angry with me, because around this point in Ultimate Marvel, she had no idea that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Now, when it comes to Logan, he's about to leave. Then he realized something. A bunch of vans just pulled up right in front of Peter's house. They know that Logan is there. And so as we dive into issue number 35, we're really getting into the idea of picking up with Logan and Peter Parker, trying to figure out like what to do. We're also getting our first look at the entire team of people who are trying to track down Logan. Now for Logan, he already knows that this right now is some kind of military operation, some special op group, because no FBI team go out of the way to do all this just to get to him. But also it's the idea that for Logan, it has to do with something Weapon X. Now, For Logan, he also knows they're tracking him because of the Weapon X tracker inside his body. And so what you have Logan do next, he cuts himself. And here's the reason why, because it shuts down the tracker long enough to allow Peter Parker to get into his Spider-Man outfit, grab Logan, get out of the home, the Parkers, tip the van over and leave. Now with the van tipping over, the neighbors, they heard it. They're kind of like, what in the world is going on outside? And because their cover is now officially blown, they have to leave that area. Now, before all that happened, for this special operation team right now, they're trying to figure out like, what is that connection between Logan and also Peter Parker? Because they have the entire history of the Parker family. But now we switch back over to Logan and Peter Parker heading over to that diner. And the reason why, because for Logan, he wants some answers. Because remember, in the first chapter, the owner of the diner was told, get the heck out of there by that lady. And so is Logan saying like, okay, what is your connection to her? Now the guy, he's freaking out because he honestly thought that that whole entire moment was being done by police or the FBI. And he also thought like, once they were done, they're going to pay him back, get his diner fixed up again, because his diner is completely ruined. When he calls the FBI, they're kind of like, dude, we have no idea what you're talking about, because it was not the FBI. But it's also Logan finding out like, listen, this guy's innocent because that guy had a note on the money that she had given to him. And so for Peter and also Logan, they're kind of wondering what is their next move, because they still need some answers. And so we see Logan going over to the Black Widow. Now I kind of like this a tad bit, and the reason why, because in the main Marvel universe, it was well established the connection between Wolverine and Black Widow. And so for Brian Michael Bendis, it's him right now taking that connection and bringing it over to the Ultimate Marvel Universe, but a tad bit differently. We learn here the two characters used to date one another until she realized that Logan was just using her as a way to get information out of her. Now, the reason why he's here right now is to figure out if Nick Fury is the one trying to come after him. Now for Black Widow, she has no way to confirm what Logan is thinking at the moment, because it's Nick Fury. The dude has secrets on secrets. But also she realized what Logan is trying to do right now. The reason why he came here, because he knows they're tracking him, but also wants to know like, will they attack him inside the home of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent like the Black Widow? And so once she realized that, she gets very upset because once again, he is using her. And so she kicks him and also Spider-Man out of her house. Except right after they leave the house of Black Widow, they're kind of wondering once again, what is their next move? What could they possibly do? But out of nowhere, a rocket flies by, gets Logan, and sends him flying away. And we do see a small explosion. And so we're kind of left to wonder, did Logan somehow survive that explosion? But now we're able to transition into the third chapter. Now, the third chapter is really more of us just seeing Wolverine being able to get away from the missile that was shot at him and watch it explode behind him in the warehouse. Now for Spider-Man, he has no idea if Logan can survive that explosion, but it's also now Spider-Man being attacked by a random helicopter. Now, once you do have Peter being able to get away from the chopper, his main goal is to find Logan. The problem is that for Logan, he wants to keep Peter out of this. Peter is only a 15-year-old boy, so keep him out of this mess that could possibly get him killed off. And so for Peter Parker, he doesn't find Logan at all, and for Logan, he goes on with his day to continue to figure out what exactly is going on here. Like, who is trying to hunt him down? And so as we pick up with Logan, the second half of the third chapter, it's really more of him just sitting there and trying to remember what she said to him back at that diner, kind of hoping there's some kind of hidden message with the idea of like, who is she and why in the world is she coming after him for? Now, when it comes to Logan, he's then confronted by some random thugs. They're not really important. What is important is that you then have Daredevil arrive, because we're in Hell Kitchen right now. And so for Matt Murdock, he wants some answers. He's kind of like, who are you? Why are you here? And why in the world are they following you for? Now for Logan, all I can say is that 1, I'm a mutant. 2, I have no idea why in the world they're here for. And 3, I am innocent. Now for Daredevil, he kind of realized something. If they're hunting down Logan in Hell's Kitchen, where innocent people are at left and right, then most likely they don't really care that much about innocent people seeing them. They kind of care, but not that much, because their main goal right now is to get Logan. Now, you didn't have Matt tell Logan they're here. When Logan comes around, Matt is gone, but now for Logan, he is completely surrounded by this military team. Now, right after that, you didn't have this lady get out of the vehicle. Now, with this lady here, we get the idea she's the leader of this team, but also she has some kind of connection to Logan, but she truly does hate the guy a lot and wants to see him, well, want to see him put down like some kind of dog. And so we kind of find out that she has bullets that are completely covered in adamantium so that they have the ability to pierce his adamantium body. And so when it comes to this lady, she just shoots Wolverine over and over again. We still have no idea who she is, but we also kind of see that no, she really does hate the man a lot. Now, luckily for Logan, he is saved at the very last second. And this is why I love this book so much, because you got Wolverine, you got Spider-Man, or you had Spider-Man, but now you have Daredevil. He's kind of like, hey, you're in Hell's Kitchen, and right now you're hurting somebody in my city. And that right there is not okay at all. Now, as we get into the 4th chapter of this storyline, we really do pick up with Jean Grey. Now, here's the thing, because by this point in the Ultimate Marvel timeline, Jean Grey had already became the Phoenix, and Thor told her like, the Phoenix is still inside of you. And so as we get into the opening pages of this chapter, we see her right now kind of going through this weird nightmare where it's Logan calling out to her. Now, it's the idea that for her and Logan, their minds are still connected. And so it's Logan saying like, I need your help. Jean, please come help me. We also see a small glimpse of the Phoenix, but when we go back into reality, it's Jean Grey asking the rest of the X-Men like, has anyone heard from Logan? Because I believe there's a possibility that he's in danger. But this kind of leads us back over to Wolverine and Daredevil, where you have Matt Murdock right now, like doing this standoff with this random lady who's currently leading this team who wants to bring down Logan. Now, while you do have both sides in the standoff, we kind of find out Peter Parker is not gone yet. He actually kept looking for Logan and came back right in time to kind of help out with this situation. Now, to Matt Murdock, he made everything a whole lot worse. But either way, you now have our 3 heroes kind of realize that they have to get out of there because they hid behind a van that is going to explode. And so you do have our 3 guys being able to get away in time, but regroup somewhere else far away from her and her whole entire team. Now for Wolverine and also Daredevil, I kind of like this a lot because both those guys right there still realize they're still being not surrounded, but that military team is still nearby because for Matt Murdock, he can hear them all the way over there. And for Wolverine, he can smell them. Now, Peter Parker, he's kind of like, I'm lost, I'm confused. How in the world can you guys still hear them? But it's the idea that for Matt, he's telling Logan like, they hate you. Now, he also tells Logan what their plan is next. The lady, she's heading for the rooftop. The rest of the team will stay on the ground. And so for Wolverine, he says, it's about time for me and her have a one-on-one conversation. So he asks Peter Parker to take him to the rooftop to confront her. And I like this moment a lot because once you have Wolverine being able to confront her, for Wolverine, it's about time for him to get the answers that he is looking for. Like, who are you? Why in the world are you trying to hunt me down? Like, who in the world are you to me? And at first she says, I'm your wife. And I was kind of like, as a kid, I'm not gonna lie to you. As a kid, it shocked me. I was like, whoa, wait a second. Is there a possibility she is his wife, but she's playing mind games with him to distract him long enough to allow her team to save her because she says, oh, I'm your wife. I'm your sister, I'm your aunt, cousin, your mother. Like, who cares? I hate you. I want to bring you down. Now, you do have her team being able to arrive just in time to help her out in that situation to get her away. Now, for Spider-Man, he realized Wolverine got shot down by that chopper that had saved this random lady. So once again, his healing factor must kicked in. We also learn here for Logan the reason why he didn't call the X-Men. Because for Logan, okay, this is a callback. So in Ultimate X-Men Volume 1, Magneto was using Wolverine, who was a well-known assassin, to kill off Charles Xavier. And so he lied to Charles to get close to Charles to kill him. But while being with the X-Men, he kind of realized what Charles was trying to achieve, something great for the entire world. And so for Wolverine, ever since then, he kind of feels like he's in debt to Charles Xavier. But it's also Wolverine saying like, I don't want to get those people involved in my mess. Like what's happening right now is because of me, not because of them. And they kind of deserve the idea of not being involved in all my mess for once. Now for Logan, comes to find out, it's too late. The reason why? Spider-Man made that call. And here comes the rest of the Ultimate X-Men team. And I just love this huge panel right here, our splash page. Man, it's so beautiful to me. But now we kind of sit down and dive into the 5th chapter. And the 5th chapter for me, it's really more of like the Jean Grey show at the end of this. You see why? Because as we get into the opening pages of this chapter, we really do pick up at Weapon X in the past. Now here's the reason why though, because for Charles Xavier, it's him right now going into the mind of Wolverine. They kind of see like, does Wolverine possibly know who that lady is? And why in the world is she coming after him? And so while being in the mind of Wolverine, we get to that point where it's Logan being turned into Weapon X, the adamantium bonding process. And so once you have Charles and Wolverine look around and see who was there, Wolverine realized she was there. She was also part of Weapon X. Now, this makes a lot of sense because in Volume 2, we had the X-Men and S.H.I.E.L.D. shut down Weapon X for good. But the thing is, those people, they were very loyal to their leader, but also they were taught to hate mutants no matter what. And so for the X-Men, because of Wolverine, Weapon X got shut down. And so for her and the rest of her crew, they're coming after him because one, he was part of Weapon X, and two, he's the reason why they no longer have that kind of job anymore. And so now it's time for Charles to talk to Nick Fury. And this conversation is really more of us seeing Charles telling Nick like, hey, they're coming after one of my students, which also means that the X-Men must step in to hopefully shut them down. Now for Nick Fury, that's not okay at all because this is a military problem to him. And here's the reason why, because back in the past, when it came to Weapon X, it was part of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was part of the American government. Now, of course, for Weapon X, they kind of went their own way without anyone noticing. But the thing is, for Nick Fury, that part right there makes this a military problem, not an X-Men kind of problem. And he's telling Charles, like, you must stay out of this because, again, this is our kind of problem. Now, for Charles, he said, listen, when it comes to Logan, I don't know what I can do with him because I can't control him. But it's Nick saying, you better control him because if you don't, I will. Stay out of this mess. This is a military problem. Now, we also have to remember that for Jean Grey, the reason why she does hate Logan is not just because he lied to join the X-Men, it's also because Logan tried to kill off Scott Summers in the last story arc, really 2 story arcs ago. And the reason why, because he wanted to get back with Jean Grey. And so the only way to do that was remove Scott Summers. The problem was that Scott came back to the Savage Land and told everyone what Logan did. Now, Scott forgave Logan. Charles forgave Logan. Jean Grey and some of the X-Men did not forgive Logan at all. As a matter of fact, you have Jean Grey go outside with Logan and say, I will never forgive you because you tried to kill off the man that I love. Now, while you have Jean Grey telling Logan that, she also tells Logan, if you ever try to think of me in some kind of romantic kind of way, I'll make sure your life is a living hell. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey and Logan, they both realize that something is coming. And we learn here that lady, by the way, her name is Tara. But when it comes to Tara, what she did was she had sent some of her guys to head over to school of Charles Xavier. Now, we're kind of left to wonder what their plan could actually been, because they did have some missiles on them, but she did not want to use the missiles just yet. Either way, those guys are then confronted by Jean Grey. Now, again, for Jean Grey, she has the powers of the Phoenix inside of her. And so in some storylines, that power just comes out of nowhere. And so right now we're seeing is just Jean Grey kind of being corrupted by the power of the Phoenix inside of her. And we see her just blow up the entire helicopter, just like that. And so this leads into the final chapter of this storyline, where we do pick up with the X-Men finding Jean Grey after having one of those Phoenix episodes once again. Now, it's a way to kind of remove Jean Grey from the rest of the storyline, because you do have Nightcrawler go out of his way to teleport her over to Charles Xavier to make sure, like, hey, she gets the help that she actually needs at the moment. Now, while she's over there, for the rest of the X-Men, they're kind of like, hey, Wolverine, we're coming with you. Now, for Nightcrawler, it makes a lot of sense. And the reason why, because for Nightcrawler, he was also captured by Weapon X alongside Rogue and the Juggernaut. But when it comes to the rest of the X-Men, they're like, no, we're all going with you, because we want to bring them down, because technically what they're doing is a mutant hate crime. And for Wolverine, he's okay with the idea of them coming. But now we switch over to Tara. Now, here's the thing, because when it comes to Tara, we kind of learn like who hired her and her team to go after Wolverine. And we kind of get the idea that it was somebody who works in the government. And the reason why I'm saying that, because they were kind of hoping for the idea of getting Wolverine while he was away from the X-Men. Because remember, in the Return of the King storyline for the X-Men, they are now part of the whole SHIELD umbrella. That was a deal done between Charles Xavier and Nick Fury, meaning that once these students graduate from his school, they'll then become part of the Ultimates team to be used out there in the field by Nick Fury. And so for the X-Men, they're now under SHIELD's umbrella, and SHIELD is under the American government umbrella, which means Wolverine is now well protected. And so she messed up the job. She missed her chance to get Logan. Now, while her call does end, that is when we see the X-Men charge in. Now, for the X-Men, their main goal now is to get Tara. But Tara, she's fast. As soon as the X-Men bust into that room, she killed off every single person on her team, and then she took her own life. Now, for Wolverine, this sucks, because he was kind of hoping to get her, to use her for information about his past possibly. But also, like, with her being around, it constantly reminded him about his first memory. The idea of becoming a weapon for Weapon X. Because guys, in his reality, his mind was also wiped like he was in the main Marvel universe. Now, right after she had killed herself, SHIELD arrives. So now we're getting our first look at Dum Dum Dugan in this reality. Now, for Dum Dum Dugan, this dude right off bat says, you guys had failed us. And here's the reason why he's saying that, because again, for Nick Fury, he told Charles, let us handle this, not you guys. And for Dum Dum Dugan, he points out why Nick said that, because for Dum Dum, they already knew that Tara was a grunt. Their main target was the person that actually hired her. So here's the thing, we could have traced her call back to the person who was actually in charge. But guess what? Now we can't. Now it's also him saying, like, those people who were coming after you, who they're working for, is somebody higher up in the government. Let me explain. Because for Wolverine, he was a weapon. For Weapon X, his files are heavily sealed up. Only the highest people in the government have the clearance to open up those files to learn more about Logan. And the thing is, those people are trying to use Logan as a way to ruin the mutant inhuman relations. Because you guys, the X-Men, went on a world tour. We saw that in like volume 3 or 4, but either way, he's right. But that magazine cover had all the different members of the X-Men, but they had Wolverine on the front page. Here's the problem though. Wolverine is a well-known assassin across the world. And here you go right now with that guy right there on the front cover of a magazine. Anybody is now going to try to use Wolverine to help ruin the chances of mutants and humans coming together. So you guys need to stop all this reckless attacking places and figure out the right moves to make on your next missions. But also, you might want to sit down for a while as well too, until things calm down, because right now, your weakest link to break down your team, to break down the mutants and human relations is Wolverine. And he walks away. Now, the book does end on the note where we do see Jean Grey having a hard time dealing with the fact that she had killed off 2 people. Now, again, she had a Phoenix episode. And so is Cyclops right now trying to reason with her like, hey, you had no choice. You had to do what you had to do. Now, you also have Jean Grey see Wolverine outside. And she's kind of wondering like, what is he possibly thinking about? And so this is okay. So it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men, right? And we're going to pick up with the second storyline Brian Michael Bendis did, which of course is called New Mutants. Now, real quickly, I do want to say, like, even though it is called New Mutants, we're not really going to see new mutants like that in this storyline. And what I mean by that statement is that when it came to Marvel Comics in the early 1980s, you had Marvel give X-Men its first spinoff. And that first spinoff was New Mutants. You had Cannonball, Karma, Sunspot, Wolfbane. You had all these new characters, you know, appearing in that storyline. But in the Ultimate Marvel universe, the idea of New Mutants is not really that right there. Like, it's not bringing those characters in the world of Ultimate Marvel. But you are going to see some New Mutants for the Ultimate Marvel universe. Like, for example, because when you dive into issue number 40, you're really picking up with the first appearance of Ultimate Angel. Now, for me personally, I don't know why I didn't really like Ultimate Angel in this reality. It's just me. But either way, though, for Ultimate Angel in this reality, his parents weren't really close to him. Matter of fact, they kind of kept him at a distance. You see, for Ultimate Angel, he was kind of forced to live on his own in a different home away from theirs. And on top of that, you had all these different like lawyers or other people who worked for his parents kind of help take care of him. But again, they kept his distance from him. But now it's them saying like, let's go ahead and send him off to Charles Xavier. He can now officially take care of Angel for us. And so just like that, for Jean Grey and Charles Xavier, they have now officially brought over a brand new mutant. Now, for me personally, I kind of like this issue because it does bring up the idea of religion. And what I mean by that statement is that with the idea of Angel being around, you have some members, really only one member of the X-Men begin to freak out. And that would be Rogue. Because for Rogue, you know, she's been around for a while in Ultimate Marvel, and she has seen different kinds of mutants. But now their brand new student is Angel, an actual angel in her mindset. But also, she's sitting across from Nightcrawler, who looks like a demon. And so for Rogue, it's the idea that now things are beginning to change for the mutant race. Because now when she looks up, she sees a demon and she also sees an angel. And she kind of freaks out. Now, the whole idea of Angel can make things a whole lot worse for the X-Men in this chapter. And the reason why, because you did have a crowd of people outside just expressing their anger about the idea of Angel being there, this supposed mutant that looked like an angel. Now, for Charles Xavier and the X-Men trying to figure out, like, how in the world did the public find out about Angel? Well, it's the idea of Beast. You see, for Beast, we saw this in an earlier story arc. For Beast, he goes online too much. And so for Beast, he has this fan base he, talks to online, and he kind of told them what's going on in their daily lives. One of those things is that the X-Men had just gained a new person, and it's an angel. And so, of course, word got out very quickly, and now you have this crowd of people being very angry about the idea of a mutant that's now looking like an angel, which of course means it's now attacking their religion. And so what we're seeing right now is the idea of Angel just leaving. Now for Charles Xavier, he sent Storm after him, sorry. And the reason why, because for Angel, when he arrived, he kind of found Storm, somewhat attractive. And so you have Storm go out of her way to at least try her best to communicate with Angel. Now for Angel, it's the idea that he's having a hard time being a mutant, because for him, he never really had anybody in his corner that he could talk to, someone he could bond with, because his family kind of kept him away. They kept him at a distance. They were not really there in his corner when it came to him finding out that he was a mutant. And so now seeing all these different people out there talking about him in a negative way, he's kind of like, I can't handle it. It bothers me. It's horrible. But is Storm kind of telling her like, she understands, because one, she's a mutant, but also the fact like she's an X-Men. And so with her being an X-Men, she has to use her powers in a way to defend a world that technically hates her. But it's also her kind of like, hey, we're here. We're just like you. We're mutants. And so you didn't have Angel go out of his way to confront the crowd. And when he does, he says, I'm not an angel. I'm a mutant. But to close on this chapter, we did pick up with Beast. And with the idea of Beast now having a few people at the school no longer trust him or no longer wanting to be around him, you have Beast right now trying to spend some time on his own, but then he's confronted by somebody. And that wraps up the first chapter. But now we have to pick up with the second issue or second chapter of the storyline. Now, the second chapter, it's again kind of going the idea of New Mutants, but it's very short story. It's a very short story. And the reason why, because we pick up this young boy. Now, this young boy, he's just walking around the house and kind of realize that his mom is nowhere to be found. There's no breakfast, not a banana, like everything is just not there where it should be yet. And so for him, it's kind of like, where in the world could my parents be at? Now, while he does try to walk over to school, he begins to realize that there's no one around him again. Now, for a brief moment, he does see some people, except when he turns around, all those different people die just like that. And then when he arrives at school, it does seem like everything is normal, right? But then while talking to his girlfriend, everyone around him, again, begins to die. It's kind of like they're being vaporized because of his mutant ability. And so, of course, he begins to freak out. So you did have Wolverine be the guy to locate this kid. Now we kind of find out that this kid does release some kind of toxins into the air, but like also acid poison as well. And so it leads to folks being vaporized in a radius around him. Now, for Wolverine, he's not really being affected by this. And the reason why, because, well, he's a mutant. Sorry, he has a healing factor. And so it's the idea of like with him having that healing factor, he's okay. He'll be able to survive. But he was kind of sent here to go ahead and kill off this kid because unfortunately, there's nothing they can do for him, because it's the idea that no matter what, if he gets near somebody, he'll kill that person just like that. And so we see Wolverine, unfortunately, kill the kid off. And that's really the second chapter of this storyline. Now, as we get into the third chapter, we now have to pick up at the White House. Now, at the White House, we do pick up with the president. And it's the president right now meeting the ultimate version of Karma. Now, I know at the very beginning of the video, I said like the title of the storyline is called New Mutants, and we might not really see any of the actual New Mutant characters like we do in the main Marvel universe. But here's one of them right now. For Karma, in the main Marvel universe, she was part of the original New Mutants team. Now in the Ultimate Marvel universe, she's part of a Black Ops team that's right now, looking over the brain of the president. And there's a good reason why she's doing this for, and it'll be told to us at the end of this chapter. But you do have her kind of scan the mind of the president. But while you have that going on, we do pick up with Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, this is Bendis kind of reminding us that in an earlier story arc, for really the last story arc, Jean Grey powered out of control again, and she had killed off 2 people. Now, technically, those 2 people, they hated mutants, and they came to school of Charles Xavier to kill some of the X-Men at least. But when it came to Jean Grey, like I said, she lost control of her powers. It's also kind of hinting at the idea of the Phoenix still being inside of her. And so is Cyclops right now just kind of expressing his concerns for his girlfriend because, again, she lost control of her powers and she had killed off some people. But it's Jean Grey kind of like, hey, Scott, everything is going to be A-okay. But it's also Scott wondering, like, what is Charles Xavier actually doing when it comes to supposedly helping out Jean Grey control her abilities? Now, you do have Charles go ahead and call over a few members of the X-Men. And the reason why, because, well, for Charles Xavier, he had located another new mutant. Now, this new mutant that he had located is Dazzler. So we're getting our first look at the Ultimate Marvel universe of Dazzler. Now, when it comes to Dazzler in this reality, she still is a performer, but she's not really a pop star, more of a rock star. Now, when it comes to Dazzler, it's the idea that she wants to go public about her being a mutant. But for the X-Men, they want to go ahead and bring her in. Now, once they do go confront her, you really do have her say like, hey, I heard about you guys. I don't care. Matter of fact, there was another group of people who also came to me, try to recruit me as well. I'm going to tell you, like I told them, go away. Because technically, the only reason why I need you around is to help get my album out there for people to hear. And that's really it. Now, for Cyclops, I want to know, like, who is the other group of people who has supposedly came out of their way to recruit Dazzler? Now, this kind of leads us over to, well, the ending of this chapter, where we pick up with the president again. Now, when it comes to the president, he's now being confronted by different members of his administration, right? And right now, they're saying they have some concerns for the president. And the reason why, because even though the president is right now trying to build better relations between mutants and also humans and work with Charles Xavier, it's that last part right there that's technically a problem. The idea of working with Charles Xavier, because Charles has caused a lot of issues in the previous story arcs leading into this one right here. Let's not forget that in Mark Millar's run, we saw that Charles lied to the entire world when it came to killing off Magneto, which then led to Magneto coming back and doing some more damage to America. But also the fact they have Wolverine. And when it comes to Wolverine, he's a well-known assassin. And so you have Bendis right now doing a callback to the previous chapter because, as we saw, there was a new mutant. But his powers killed off everyone in his city because his powers had released some kind of toxin into the air that vaporized people. And so for Wolverine, he had to go out of his way to kill that young boy to save the world. But for the president, what he was told that it was just some kind of chemical out there that had killed people. He got a false report that came from S.H.I.E.L.D. And again, for the X-Men, they're now part of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're under that S.H.I.E.L.D. umbrella. The idea that in the future, each member of the X-Men, when they do graduate Charles School, they'll head over to the Ultimates team, possibly down the road. And so it's the different members of his administration saying, like, listen, President, like, we love the idea that we're going to be, build that relations between mutants and humans. But working with Charles Xavier is possibly a bad idea. So right now, what you need is new mutants to work with. And so you didn't have the book give us our first introduction to Ultimate Emma Frost. Now, as we get into the next chapter of Ultimate X-Men, we're now getting into the idea of seeing Storm being very upset. And the reason why, because for Storm, she had just found out that Beast has left the X-Men. Now, the reason why Beast had officially left the X-Men is all because, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to save that for the later chapters of this storyline. But for Storm, her and Beast began dating in the early parts of Mark Millar's run on Ultimate X-Men. But we have to remember, when it came to Beast, he kind of felt like Storm did not truly love him because he always thought that Charles was always playing with the minds of the different members of the X-Men. So when it came to Storm, he believed that Charles kind of forced her mind to fall in love with Beast. Now, of course, he found out, no, that was not the case at all. But again, he now had left. And the question is, why in the world did Beast just leave and tell anyone at all? Now, for Charles, he plans on using Cerebro to hopefully find Beast. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and switch back over to the Emma Frost storyline. And the reason why, because for Emma Frost, we kind of find out here that it's really more of her explaining what she's trying to achieve for the president. Now, we also learned that for Emma Frost, she was a student of Charles Xavier, also kind of hinting at the idea that they were lovers. So again, we're being introduced to another lover of Charles Xavier in this reality. But for Emma Frost, the reason why she's no longer working with Charles Xavier because it's the idea that she hated using mutants as some kind of strike force like the X-Men truly are. And she kind of feels like mutants should be educators. Mutants should be used out there in the world to teach people the life of a mutant and not be out there just as a strike force causing problems for humans and mutants down the road. Now, before we kind of dive in more about the idea of like what Emma Frost is planning, we do see Charles being able to locate Beast. Now, for Beast, he's really part of Emma Frost's plan when it comes to helping out the president, because it's the idea that for Beast, he was a student of Charles Xavier. That part right there is really important. Now, for Charles, once he does find Beast, he tries to communicate with Beast, work with Beast about the idea of why he had officially left the X-Men. Now, when it comes to Beast, he's not really trying to explain things to Charles. And let's not forget, for Charles, he has no idea what's going on with the president or the idea his ex-lover is playing some game at the moment. And I kind of want to lean into that right there because for Emma Frost, what we're seeing right now is she's putting together her own new mutant team. The idea of different characters who can be used in a way to educate the world about mutants and not be a strike force. So for example, Alex Summers. Now for Alex, he is the older brother to Cyclops in this reality. But also the idea of like, hey, look, we got the brother to Scott Summers, who's on the side of not the strike force, but on the side of let's educate the human race. Oh, his girlfriend is also Polaris. Now we also learn here for the president, he says no to Polaris, only because it's the idea that she has the same powers as Magneto. Dazzler is also recruited as well, but Beast is one of the few also selected. And the reason why, because Beast is a former student of Charles Xavier. Just like that. Bam, bam, double combo. You got Alex Summers and now you have the Beast. With those two right there, you're going to have more and more people kind of look at Charles in a different way, saying what he's doing right now is completely wrong. But for Emma, what she's doing right now is the right way to go. And for the president, that right there will help him a lot because he's now supporting her. He's now working with her. Now, something else I do want to point out is the idea that you do have some people who secretly work for the president who don't like the idea of him trying to build relations with the mutant race. Like, for example, in the last story arc, we had saw that there was somebody in the government who was trying to bring down Wolverine. The whole idea of the blockbuster storyline. Well, the same people right now, they're right now trying to make a new game plan to hopefully bring down this whole plan the president is trying to achieve. And so to close on this chapter, when we do switch over to, the X-Men, they're kind of wondering like, why did Beast leave? Now for Charles, he remembers what Scott told him about Dazzler, that another organization had came to her before the X-Men did. It's the idea of Emma Frost had came first to talk to Dazzler. And so for Charles, he's wondering who came and communicated with who had talked to Dazzler. Now, while you do have the X-Men kind of wondering that, you didn't have Jean Grey and Charles realize they're about to have some visitors very soon. And of course, that would be Nick Fury. But as we get into the next chapter, we're really getting into the idea of seeing, Angel and Wolverine in the danger room. Now, it's really more the book trying to tell us, like, okay, for Angel, this dude has never been in a fight before his entire life. And so what we're seeing right now at the moment is the idea of really more Wolverine trying to show Angel some kind of fighting moves to use out there in the field. But while you have the two currently training with one another, you did have Wolverine realize that Nick Fury is there. Now, the reason why Nick Fury is there, because for Nick Fury, he's really being used more as a way to say, like, hey, Charles Xavier, you have people right now in the government who truly do believe that you are using your abilities as a way to, change their minds when it comes to their ideas of how mutants are in the world. That really you have people right now believing that you're somewhat controlling the mind of the president to make him follow along with your agenda. Now, for Nick Fury, he already knows that's not the case at all. But it's also Nick saying, like, the president is now working with Emma Frost. But it's also Nick saying, listen, with him now still going through his whole plan of being pro-mutant and wanting to work alongside with the mutant race, you have some people right now wanting to stop that from happening. And so how would they do that? Well, why not try to attack the president and also attack the new mutants that he's trying to work with as he's giving a speech out to the public? And those same people are the same ones who tried to attack Wolverine in the previous story arc. And so it's Nick saying, like, I need the X-Men to be out there to protect the president, but also protect those new mutants as well. But this kind of leads into the part where we do see the president right now giving out his big speech to show the entire world that now he's trying to work alongside with the mutant race, trying to help humans and mutants build relations with one another. And so while we see the president right now giving out his new speech, while having the new mutant stand right by him, we also see Sentinels arrive out of nowhere. Now, this is a major problem. And the reason why, because for the new mutants, they have not really trained to fight against Sentinels at all. But also, again, for Emma Frost, she made sure that her team was not going to be used as a strike force. Instead, being used as a way to teach humans about mutants. And so luckily for them, the X-Men were there to try to help out, to protect them, but also bring down those Sentinels. Now, as the battle goes on, it gets to the point where we see that Beast is possibly dead. Now, when it came to Mark Millar's run, we saw a point where it did seem like Beast was dead, but after that part, we saw Beast survived. Well, this time, we're left to believe that Beast is not going to survive. And so as we enter the final chapter of the storyline, what we're seeing here at the moment is just Storm being very upset with the idea of losing Beast because, again, she was in love with Beast. It wasn't the idea that you had Charles Xavier like playing with her mind and kind of forcing her to fall in love with Beast. No, she truly did care for Beast and wanted to be with him. But unfortunately now Beast is officially dead, it seems like, in the world of Ultimate Marvel Comics. And so you have Storm right now just going at it when it comes to the Sentinels and just bringing them down left and right. You're kind of like, oh my God, Storm, you are showing us like your full power right now. It's amazing to see. But you didn't have Charles say, I got to put her to sleep, because even though she did take out the Sentinels, one of them could have fell on some innocent people. Now, once he does that, he then tells the X-Men it's now time for them to go ahead and leave. Now, Nick Fury does arrive. And Nick Fury, he's now getting the okay to go after the people who were responsible for this attack. And here's the thing, though, because for the Sentinels, only 3 people had the ability to use those robots. One of them is dead. That means only 2 is still alive, and 2 of them can be found very easily. And so that leads us over to, well, Karma kind of using her powers to take over the mind of one of the two people who were responsible for this attack. Two people who are high up in the American government system. And so you really do have, Nick Fury say, hey, Karma, go ahead and take over the mind of one of those guys, but also like make sure the other one gives you enough evidence to use against him. And of course, that happens. And so once Nick got that evidence, bam, runs in, takes both guys, they are arrested. Now, these two guys are the same guys who were responsible for what happened to Wolverine in the blockbuster storyline. And so this kind of leads into the point where we see the Ultimate X-Men team now just grieving because now it's Beast's funeral. Beast is now officially dead. And so it's the idea that you now have the X-Men kind of wondering what's next because look what just happened. When you had a team out there and their main goal was to not be a strike force, to be something different, to teach the human race had failed right in front of the eyes of the American people, but also in the eyes of Charles Xavier and Emma Frost. And so for Emma, she's kind of wondering like, what's next for her and her students? What's next for Charles and his students? Because he lost Beast. Her idea failed. But yeah, this is okay, so I want to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now, hear me out, because when it comes to Ultimate X-Men, we saw Mark Millar's run, Brian Michael Bendis' run. Now, for Brian Michael Bendis, he only had like 2 storylines, and that was really it. And I kind of felt like for Michael, he could have done a tad bit more. But now we're entering the Brian Vaughn run on Ultimate X-Men. Now, his first story arc was Tempest. And really, when it comes to Brian, he does try to pick up where Brian Michael Bendis left off at, but also kind of bring in some new concepts as well. Like, for example, the idea of Mr. Sinister being introduced in this storyline. Now, for me personally, when it came to all the different characters in Ultimate X-Men, there are a lot of different characters I do like in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And there are some I don't like in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And the same thing goes for the main Marvel Universe as well. But over in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, I did not like the idea of Mr. Sinister because I felt like they were just trying to do a tad bit too much. But as we get into the opening pages for Ultimate X-Men issue number 46, we really do pick up with Nightcrawler and also Angel going after a new mutant, and that would be North Star. Now, for North Star, in the main Marvel universe, he was part of Alpha Flight, but also the idea that he was gay. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up now, because in the Ultimate Marvel universe, he's also gay in this reality as well. And for Nightcrawler in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, he does not really like the idea of people being gay. You'll see what I mean here as we get into later storylines down the road, because for Nightcrawler, once he hears the idea of North Star being gay, he kind of does shift his focus onto him being gay, more of being there trying to help out North Star. Now, when it comes to Angel and Nightcrawler, the reason why they are there because for Charles Xavier, he had detected a new mutant, and that was North Star. And it's them right now trying to recruit him, but for North Star, at first, he didn't realize that he was a mutant. And matter of fact, we kind of get the idea that he hated mutants, but now he's being told that, hey, you are a mutant. And so for North Star, he already knows he does not want to be with the X-Men because word has gotten out that one of their X-Men, Beast, had died in the previous story arc. So why in the world would he go to a school that is supposed to help mutants, but apparently mutants get killed at that school because they're part of some superhero team? But either way, you have North Star just run away. But now we have to shift over to Colossus and also Wolverine. Now, we already established the idea that for these characters, they are really close friends with one another. We already saw that in earlier storylines, but it's them right now kind of having this battle in the middle of the danger room. Now, it's Colossus want to see if he's able to go toe-to-toe with Wolverine, or Wolverine claws will be able to scratch Colossus. But while you do have the two guys fighting against one another in the danger room,
We kind of find out that Charles Xavier and also Emma Frost is watching them as well. Now, we already established in the last video that for Emma and Charles, they go back, like they used to date, but also Charles was her professor. Now, when it came to Charles Xavier, Emma Frost, they had this disagreement on what the schools should be like, what the X-Men should be like. Like, they should not be using young mutants to kind of build that bridge between mutants and humans in the way that Charles is doing it as some kind of superhero team. Instead, for Emma Frost, she kind of feels like mutants should go out of their way to try to educate humans on how mutants work and how mutants are not completely evil. But either way, for her to see Wolverine and Colossus fighting against one another, it really does bother her a lot. And she asked Charles to have them stop. But it's Charles saying like, no, they're right now trying to release that anger that's built inside of them because they had to watch one of their friends die, again, Beast. And so it's them right now just trying to find an outlet. But it's also Emma Frost saying like, you're wrong. And the thing is, you tell me you have changed, that you have gotten colder, that you're more like this guy who says, you know what, we should no longer have human names. We should have mutant names. That's not you. Now, honestly, she's right. That's more Magneto. We saw that in the earlier volumes for Ultimate X-Men. But you have Emma Frost say that she is leaving. And matter of fact, she can go out of her way to take a few mutants with her as well. Now, I do want to go ahead and shift over to Jean Grey and also Cyclops. Now, for those two characters, they're watching Alex leave. Now, guys, remember, we had established in the last video that Alex Summers in this reality is actually the older brother out of him and Scott Summers. But for Alex, he was offered a chance to stay at Charles' school to possibly join the X-Men. But for Alex, he denied that request and decided to leave with Emma Frost. And of course, it's Emma right now trying to build her own school up somewhere else. Now, while they're leaving, you have Jean Grey go into the mind of Scott Summers. Now, we kind of learned that when he was a young boy after watching some, I think it was Star Wars, he had created this fake world better known as Corsair. Now, if you know your main Marvel universe, Corsair was the father to Cyclops and also Havoc. Now, in this reality, we're kind of getting the idea that we're not going to see Corsair appear in the Ultimate Marvel universe at all. But it's also Jean Grey kind of wanting to know more about Cyclops. What goes on in his mind? What goes on in the mind of the great leader of the X-Men? We're also going to establish the possibility of Iceman and Rogue getting together. Now, right now, it's just Bobby trying to teach Rogue how to ice skate. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, in later volumes down the road, they do kind of blossom into an actual relationship. And matter of fact, the later issues of this series was my first few issues I collected when it came to Ultimate X-Men. I was just all over the board. That's a story another time. But when it comes to Rogue and also Iceman, while they're ice skating, Kitty Pryde does get very upset because Bobby Drake turned the pool into an ice skating ring, and for Kitty, she wanted to use the pool. And so while you do have Kitty leave upset, she tried to go back to her room. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she does share a room with Storm. The problem is that Storm's not trying to let her into the room. And so you have Kitty use her abilities to phase through the door. Now, when she does, she sees Storm, and Storm is going through a massive change because, again, in this reality, Beast died. But for Storm, she dated Beast. She loved Beast. Now, by the point Beast died, their relationship was already on the rocks, but the idea was that she still loved him. It was kind of hoping to fix things, but he died. And so we see Storm right now had cut her hair, got brand new clothes. She's going more rock style now in this reality. But now it's time for us to go ahead and get into the idea of Mr. Sinister, because we see Northstar just walking around and you have Mr. Sinister confront Northstar. Now this begins the whole idea of a new concept for Mr. Sinister in this reality, because he does have the ability to control the mind of Northstar to tell him like, I need you right now to stand right there. And Northstar does. And we then see, well, Mr. Sinister pull out a gun and shoot Northstar as a way to close off in this chapter. Now, as we get into the next chapter, what we're seeing here at the moment is John Paul reliving the moment where he was shot by Mr. Sinister. But here's the thing, because it's Jean Grey saying, like, you're in a coma right now, but it's me in your mind at the moment trying to help you relive the actual moment to kind of help us get a better idea of what this guy looks like. Because once we're able to see who he is, then we'll be able to find him and hopefully stop him. And so we also learned that when it came to North Star, he was the fifth target that night, meaning that 4 other mutants were killed off. Now, one of the 4 mutants, for me, it does look like Marrow. I want to say the other one is Sync. The last 2, I have no idea who they could possibly be. But either way, when it comes to John Paul, he does kind of show Jean Grey who it was. He gets a good look, it's Mr. Sinister. Now, once he does wake up from his coma, we do see him be confronted by Jean Grey and Colossus in the real world. Now, this right here begins the whole idea of the relationship between Colossus and also John Paul in the Ultimate Marvel universe because, well, Colossus is gay. Now, I want to say at this point, he has not officially came out yet, but he will soon down the road when it comes to our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now we do switch over to Wolverine. Now for Wolverine, he's trying his best to kind of get into a crime scene and look around and see what exactly happened to one of the mutants that was killed off by Mr. Sinister. And so while you do have the 2 police officers kind of walk away from the crime scene for a moment, it allows Wolverine kind of use the different senses to examine the bullet that was used to kill off one of the 4 mutants that Sinister had killed off. But now we see that for Cyclops, he's running this training program to kind of help out the younger members of the X-Men. So like Angel, Kitty Pryde, and also Iceman, and Rogue as well. Because it's the idea that you have some guy out there who's killing off mutants. You never truly know when he might pop up and go after you to kind of finish his overall goal. And so it's Cyclops right now saying like, I want to make sure that you guys are well prepared for what's to come down the road if you ever had to face this guy out there in the streets. And so now we switch over to Charles Xavier and also Nick Fury. Now, this conversation for me personally, it's really important. And the reason why, because it's Nick Fury asking Charles to step down. Because Charles said, hey, Nick, we need your help. We need S.H.I.E.L.D. help. But for Nick, he's kind of like, this is not a S.H.I.E.L.D. problem. Like, yes, you do have somebody out there that's killing off mutants, but he only targeted 5 so far. 4 died, 1 survived because that 1 was able to dodge a bullet at the very last second. That'll be John Paul. But only 5 mutants have been targeted, and that's really it. This is not a S.H.I.E.L.D. problem yet. It would be different if he had killed off 50, 75, or 100 mutants across the board all at once. But for me, I cannot waste S.H.I.E.L.D. resources on a small case at the moment. But it's also him saying like, Charles, leave it alone. Because for Charles, it's him right now still trying to send out the X-Men, hopefully to kind of figure out what's happening with someone out there killing off mutants. Now, let's not forget, when it came to Nick Fury, he told Charles, I saved your school. When it came to the government, they wanted to shut down the school, but he turned the school as part of S.H.I.E.L.D., basically saying that Charles' goal now is to train the mutants until they graduate. Once they do, down the road, they're going to join the Ultimates. But anyways, when it comes to Nick, he's saying, dude, just stay out of it. Like, do what we ask you to do, which is right now, train these kids, and that is it. But now we got to switch over to Nightcrawler. Now, when we do, it's Nightcrawler confronting Storm. And the reason why, because for Charles Xavier, he had called for a meeting, right? But for Storm, she does not want to go. And she begins to kind of be straight rude to Nightcrawler. But it's Nightcrawler saying, can you stop? Like, can you stop? Because honestly, you're being a monster. Now, with me saying that, it's not him saying like, oh, because the way she looks with her brand new looks. No, it's the way she is acting at the moment. The idea that she's being harsh towards other people around her, but also, do you think Hank will love the idea of his death being used as a way to turn yourself into some kind of monster? That is completely wrong. What is wrong with you? Because I remember Weapon X when they did horrible things to Beast. You were very angry and you wanted to kill those people, but you were stopped. And the thing is, I don't think Beast would love the idea of seeing you right now turning yourself into some kind of monster, using his death as that reason. It is not okay. And so once you have Storm hear those words, she does rejoin the X-Men in the assembly. Now, when it comes to Charles Xavier, the whole idea of this meeting is really more him saying, like, you guys are not allowed to go out there in the field. Like, you guys are not allowed to lead the school. Now, the reason why Charles is saying this because he's afraid of having another funeral. Like, hey, we just buried Beast. I cannot risk the chance of burying somebody else. Now, for Cyclops, that's not fair because he feels like at least the senior class should be able to go out of their way to locate this guy, to hopefully bring this guy down, which means Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, and that's really it. I want to say I'm missing somebody, but the senior cloud be used to kind of, Nightcrawler, to go after this, bad person. Now, with all that being said, you have Wolverine walk into the room, and when it comes to Logan, he says, we don't really have a way to track this guy down. Like, we gotta go old school, meaning that knock on doors and hoping we find some kind of clue that'll lead us over to him where we can finally bring him down. Now we do switch over to Mr. Sinister. We see him right now getting ready to go back out there in the field to kill off more mutants because his main goal right now is to kill off at least 10 mutants total. Now, while trying to get his guns ready, we also see he's serving some kind of master. That master is supposedly Apocalypse. And so as we get into the third chapter, we do see the younger X-Men right now just going through a training session. Iceman, Angel, Rogue, Kitty Pryde, and Dazzler as well. Honestly, I forgot completely about Dazzler in this storyline because for Dazzler, she does not really become somewhat important in Ultimate X-Men until later stories down the road when you do have her and Angel begin to date one another. But when it comes to Dazzler, Rogue, Kitty Pryde, and Iceman, really more Iceman and Rogue, they're kind of very upset about the idea that they weren't allowed to go on this mission with the other X-Men, the senior class. Now, for Charles Xavier, he says, well, the reason why, because Iceman, look in the way you're acting right now. You're being overconfident about your abilities. You're not really acting like someone who will go out there and make sure to take care of himself, but also his fellow teammates when it comes to going after somebody who's out there killing mutants. And we do switch back over to Mr. Sinister for a brief moment to kind of get the idea like, yes, he's right now doing all this work, killing off mutants to hopefully please his master, to hand the souls over to Apocalypse. Now, he has to kill off 10 mutants by shooting them in the heart. And so far, he only has 4. He needs 6 more to kill off. And so we're kind of left to believe the next 6 are the 6 X-Men who came into this city. Storm, Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Jean Grey, and also Nightcrawler. Now, when they do arrive in the city, you do have Cyclops say, hey, go ahead and split up into 3 different teams. So the first team right now is Nightcrawler and Jean Grey. And I love this part a lot because to Nightcrawler, he loves the idea of pushing the buttons of Cyclops because when he looks at Jean Grey, to him, Jean Grey is a very fun person and Cyclops is, well, completely boring to Nightcrawler. So he's kind of wondering, why in the world are you with him for? Now, for Jean Grey, she says, well, as his girlfriend, but also as somebody who is a psychic, I can tell you right now, Cyclops is not really that boring of a person. But also, you have Jean Grey tell Nightcrawler that she knows about his own fantasies as well. But while you do have the two characters talking to one another, they are then attacked by Sunspot. So we're now getting getting our first look at Sunspot in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now, when it comes to Sunspot, his main goal is to protect this area. And so the idea right now for mutants dying just like that, he's been on patrol right now, making sure that his fellow mutants are well protected by whoever is killing off the 4 mutants, of course, being Mr. Sinister. Now, once you do have Jean Grey and Nightcrawler kind of tell Sunspot like, hey, we're not the bad guys. Matter of fact, we're the X-Men. We get the idea right here that even to the mutant race, the X-Men are right now not really loved at the moment. And the reason why, because Sunspot, they only protect themselves, or like mutants at their level, meaning like they never come down to help supposedly the second class mutants, the ones who were not really given the chance to go to Charles Xavier's school. And so for Sunspot, he's kind of like, cool, y'all here, but we don't like you, go away, we don't need your charity, you're only out here for yourselves, and that's really it. Now, for Colossus and also Cyclops, they run into the Russian mob in the area. Now, the reason why, because for Colossus, he kind of felt like he may be able to get some kind of information out of the mob, because as we learned back in Volume 1 of Ultimate X-Men, for Colossus, he used to work for the Russian mob. But of course, they begin to attack Colossus and also Cyclops. And I kind of feel like it's more because Colossus is no longer working for them. Now you have Cyclops being able to get himself out of a hostage situation and go on with the mission. But now we switch over to Wolverine and Storm. Now, this begins the process, that process. The idea of these two characters getting together. You see, for Storm, she likes the idea of Wolverine not being that person who's trying to change her back to her old ways or try to have a conversation with her about what happened to Hank. But is Wolverine kind of like, girl, one, I kind of care, but two, like, you got to realize how old I am. I have seen so many people gone through so many different things that honestly, it's part of life. Like sooner or later, your life gonna hit that rock bottom or in some kind of negative way. But you just have to move on and overcome your situations. Now, while you do have the two of them talking to one another, you have Wolverine wanting to go inside this tattoo shop. Because for Logan, he remembered that when it came to the image that Jean Grey had shared that came from John Paul's mind, he saw that Mr. Sinister has some tattoos. So why not go ahead and head over to a nearby tattoo shop? And so with Logan doing that, he finds the shop owner. You have him and Storm kind of work together to get the info out of the shop owner to where they could possibly find Mr. Sinister. And so you do have the two characters head over to the home of Mr. Sinister. Now, 3 things happen here. First, they realize that Mr. Sinister is not at home at all. But number 2, when it comes to Apocalypse, it's the guy right now worshiping some kind of mannequin. And so for Storm and also Wolverine, they're kind of like, what in the world is this? It's some kind of mannequin. But you also have Wolverine realize that when it comes to Mr. Sinister, he's not in the city at all right now. That matter of fact, he's heading over to the school of Charles Xavier, which means the other 6 mutants are the last ones that he is currently targeting. And so as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, we do pick up with Mr. Sinister being able to sneak into the school of Charles Xavier. And this is kind of huge. And the reason why, because when it comes to Charles Xavier, he's watching the cameras. He's kind of hoping that he'll see Sinister coming before he is able to get into the school. But for Mr. Sinister, he was able to go undetected when it came to all the different cameras in the school. And so you have Mr. Sinister use his powers on Charles to make sure that Charles cannot use his powers to control the mind of Mr. Sinister. And then Mr. Sinister throws Charles down a staircase. But while you have that going on, for the X-Men team that was in the city, they're trying their best right now to get back over to school right now because they realize they left school kind of defenseless. Like, yes, you do have Iceman, Rogue, Kitty Pryde, and also like Angel and Dazzler, but only Iceman really, and maybe Kitty Pryde, and maybe Rogue have been officially trained. Angel, Dazzler, has not been trained like that. And again, it's it's a maybe for Rogue and Kitty Pryde. Iceman, yes, because he was there since Volume 1. And speaking of Iceman, when you do have Mr. Sinister but to go ahead and kill off Charles Xavier, you have Iceman getting there at the very last second, stopping him from getting the chance to kill off Charles. But you didn't have Mr. Sinister shoot Iceman right in the chest. Now, we're kind of left to believe that he is possibly dead. Now, you have Rogue walk into the room and seeing her boyfriend, well, getting shot. She freaks out. Now, luckily for her, Kitty Pryde was there because you have Mr. Sinister try to shoot Rogue, but Kitty phasing ability saved Rogue's life. And this leads into Angel appearing. Now, when Angel does appear at first, it's pretty bad. You know what? Like, the dude appears, he disarms Mr. Sinister, and it does seem like everything is going to be a-okay, right? No. It's not, because you didn't have Mr. Sinister use his ability to control the mind of Angel and say, you know what? Choke yourself. And so you have Angel begin to choke himself. Now, you have Dazzler being able to appear at the very last second, kind of help save the day. The problem is that for Dazzler, she's drunk, and so she falls out the window even after she does shoot Sinister out the window. Now, you do have Mr. Sinister being able to grab on the Dazzler, making her a hostage now in this whole entire situation. Here comes the next problem, though. You see, when it comes to Rogue, she does reappear with one of the guns that belongs to Mr. Sinister. Now, for Rogue, she's kind of down with the idea of just going ahead and killing him off, to go ahead and get rid of him. But it's also Angel saying, we're not killers. We're not like him. Now, you do have Angel on accident touch Rogue's skin. Once that happens, you then have Rogue grow a pair of wings. Now, she does go out of her way to grasp Sinister and they fly up in the air. Now, her goal right now is to go ahead and kind of like kill him off. Just go ahead and drop him, right? But this kind of leads into my favorite part of the storyline, because it's Storm right now being that big sister to Rogue. And let me explain, because in the main Marvel universe, when Rogue first joined the X Men, it was kind of like, oh, okay, she's here. But no one really trusts her. Now, over time, people began to trust her, but Storm became like that big sister to Rogue. And so right now, it does kind of remind me of that. Seeing Storm be that big sister Rogue once again, because even right now, you have Mr. Sinister telling Rogue, go ahead and drop me, or let's go ahead and crash in the ground. You might die, I might die, I may survive, you may die. Who heck knows? All I know is that you should try to go ahead and kill me. But it's Storm saying like, Rogue, I'm here right now. Listen to my voice, not his voice, because what he's trying to do right now is turn you into him, a killer. And Rogue, you are not a killer. You are not like him at all. You are different. And for Rogue, it's kind of hard to believe that because she has gone through so much in the Ultimate Marvel universe, but it's Storm saying, we're not like him. We're not like them, because what is the actual point of us killing them off? Like, nothing is going to change. And so once you have Storm kind of get through the Rogue, Rogue does go back down. And, well, for Mr. Sinister, he's now officially captured. And for me, the ending is also great because it's Charles growing here. That's one thing I kind of missed when it came to the main Marvel universe, seeing different characters kind of grow over time. Because for Charles, it's him kind of realizing that these kids are not going to be safe anywhere they go. Like, yes, this school is supposed to be protected, but Mr. Sinister was able to get by all that different kind of security and still hurt the X-Men. And so it's him kind of realizing that for the X-Men, it's about time for them to try to bond with the world a tad bit more, like be more part of it. Because honestly, no matter where they go, they're always going to be in danger. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and like get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men, right? And so we're going to pick up with the Cry Wolf storyline. Now, the Cry Wolf storyline is one of those storylines I did enjoy as a kid, right? But once you kind of sit down and go back over it again as an adult, you kind of realize there was a lot of potential in this storyline that got quickly wasted by the X Men Annual. And you see what I mean
once we do get into that video right there. But go ahead and getting into the whole idea of Cry Wolf, we do pick up with Jean Grey. Now for Jean Grey, it's really more of us just seeing her at the moment right now, trying to have some time by herself, because every once in a while her powers do go a tad bit wonky. And so she's kind of like, hey, listen, while the rest of the X-Men team heads off to Coney Island, she wants to stay behind and get her powers on the right path again. Now, we do see that Cyclops has skipped out on the trip so that he'll have that time to spend with her as well. So we're kind of getting that good old usual Cyclops and Jean Grey, they love one another, isn't it great kind of moment. Now, we do switch over to Coney Island. And once we do, we kind of pick up with the other members of the Ultimate X-Men team like Wolverine, Storm, Rogue, Iceman, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, and Dazzler. By this point, we had a roster of different characters for Ultimate X-Men. Now, with all that being said, when it came to like the earlier storylines, we had established a few things. Like, for example, Rogue and Iceman are technically dating. I kind of feel like that was done because the X-Men movies as well. We also see Storm and Wolverine possibly kind of having that chance to be together. You also have Dazzler there, and for Dazzler, she's trying her best with the right moves to get with Colossus. The problem is that no one knows just yet that Colossus is technically gay. But you also have Kitty Pryde there. Kitty Pryde, she's kind of unfortunately the oddball. Like, everyone else has somebody in mind, and for Kitty, it's just her by herself. And matter of fact, that does play a role in later parts of the storyline. I don't know why I said later parts of the storyline, because the next section is really more Kitty Pryde being able to have that one-on-one conversation with Iceman. Now, when she does, it's her trying to figure out, like, why is Iceman with Rogue? Because even though he might like Rogue a lot and Rogue might like him back, the problem is that they're unable to touch one another. And for Kitty Pryde, she kind of feels like that should be really important. And so for Kitty, she knows this going off, and you have Bobby say, I'm tired of you just keep ranting and going on and on about me and Rogue. So he just kisses her. That kind of gives the idea that Homeboy was kind of hating the idea of not being able to touch Rogue, but also maybe has some feelings for Kitty Pryde as well. Now, here's the problem though, because while you have the two characters kissing, Rogue comes out of the bathroom and punches Kitty Pryde and just instantly knocks her out. But right after that moment, you then have Gambit appear. Now, when he appears, we have to remember, guys, we have not seen Gambit in a very long time when it came to our coverage over the Ultimate Marvel Universe. But if you know your Ultimate Marvel, unfortunately, Homeboy is not gonna be around that much longer. But for the sake of this storyline, he will be. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he is there for one particular reason: Rogue. And we're not really told why in the world he's there for Rogue, but it's kind of cool here because it's Gambit right now being able to bring down the entire X-Men team that was with Rogue on this trip. So Rogue, Iceman, Kitty Pryde, Kitty Pryde was already knocked out, but Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, Dazzler, just off the board just like that. And so by the time you get to the very end of this chapter, it's him saying, like, I'm not here for money. I'm not here to steal your heart. I'm just here to steal you. And so when we do switch over to Cry Wolf Part 2, we're now picking up with Rogue. First pick up with Gambit right now playing solitaire. We also see that Rogue is there, but right now she's kind of like his prisoner. But it's also the idea that he made sure that her hands are completely covered up so that she could not possibly use her powers on him. But it's him saying, like, listen, I brought you here for an actual good reason. So right now, I need you to just stay there and just chill out so my people can finally talk to you. But we now switch back over to the X-Men. And sometimes I'll skip over things like this right here, but I kind of feel like it's really important for the storyline. The reason why, because you have Wolverine not go back with the rest of the X-Men
back to the school. And the reason why, because he is so determined to find Rogue. And you'll see why as we get into the second half of this chapter alone. But when it comes to Iceman, he does feel really upset about the idea that his whole entire X-Men team right here had lost when it came to fighting against Gambit, but Rogue got taken away. And so for him, it's kind of like, I love that woman. I gotta get her back. I need her back in my life. Now, for me, I'm kind of like, dude, didn't you just cheat on her with Kitty? You know what? Fine, whatever. And you have Kitty wake up like, hey, what did I miss? What's going on? But you have Iceman being very upset about the idea of Rogue being taken away by Gambit. When we do get back over to Gambit and also Rogue, it's him kind of teasing her about the idea of why she should possibly join, this secret organization that he's officially a part of. Now, it's also him getting closer and closer to her. Now, here's the thing, because I kind of seem like for Gambit, he didn't know what her powers were completely. Like, he thought, okay, her hands are covered, I should be A-okay. And so he does get closer and closer. Rogue instantly kisses him. And of course, her powers work just like that. Now, we kind of get a small, quick, look into the origin of Gambit. And I kind of feel bad that we never truly did explore, the ultimate version of Gambit. And for me personally, I kind of hated that when it came to Ultimate Marvel. I understand that they want to keep things small back then. Even now with the current Ultimate Marvel, I kind of felt like they could have done more with this universe. Gave us more different titles, focused on different characters in this reality. Someone like Gambit would be the perfect example. And the reason why, because over in the main Marvel universe, if I remember correctly, main Marvel Gambit was still getting solo books here and there in the 2010s as well. But anyways, she does kiss him. And so now she has his powers and being able to break free. And so when we do get back over to the school of Charles Xavier, their main game can use Charles' powers and Jean Grey's powers to hopefully figure out where is Rogue? Where is Gambit? Now for Charles, it should be somewhat easy, not really easy, more not completely a waste of time, because at least he knows the powers of Rogue, but also let's not forget, him and Storm did confront Gambit a long time ago in our coverage over Ultimate X-Men and tried to recruit Gambit. So with Cerebro, it does maybe seem like with his powers, Jean Grey powers, they might be able to pinpoint where Gambit and Rogue are at. Now, getting back over to Rogue, you have Rogue right now being confronted by the Von Strucker twins. Now, for me personally, Marvel could have done so much more when it came to the Von Strucker twins. And hear me out, because honestly, they're kind of like Magneto in a way, but a little different. You'll see what I mean here in a moment. Because for Magneto in all different realities, he's always trying to achieve greatness for the mutant race. He wants to make sure that mutants are first class and humans are second class. Now, in the Ultimate Marvel universe, that man wanted to kill off humans left and right. But hey, that was Ultimate Magneto. And so for the Von Strucker twins, it's really more of okay, we want to see mutants be first class. We want to see mutants just take over, right? We realize we got to go at it in a different way. Not really with power, but more of money. Corporate takeover. So why don't we use other mutants to kind of get us intel on other companies that are being run by humans, use that intel to bring them down? And so it's them saying we want to do corporate takeover across the world to kind of help set things up for the mutant race. And so for Gambit, he has been involved with them for a good while. They want to bring Rogue in. And their offer is that they believe they could technically help Rogue get better with her powers so that she can then officially kiss someone. And that part right there, it's really important, because earlier she saw Bobby, the boy she loves so much, kiss someone else. And she's kind of I could not give that to him. So now there is a possibility they can give that over to me. So this particular chapter does end on the note where you do have Storm and Wolverine being able to meet up with one another. Now let's not forget that when it came to Storm, she had just lost Beast back in Brian Michael Bendis' New Mutant storyline. So not too long ago, but it's also her trying to begin the process of moving on from Beast and possibly finding something with Wolverine. Now, for Wolverine, he wants to find Rogue. And I like this a lot. And the reason why, because it's Wolverine telling us that he looks at Rogue as a little sister, somewhat similar to what we see over in the main Marvel universe. But for Wolverine, it's the idea that for Rogue, she was also part of Weapon X. She was abused by those people like he was. And so for Wolverine's kind of like, I look at her as a little sister I need to protect. And so the idea of her now being with that guy and possibly being a prisoner bothers him a lot. But either way, you do have Wolverine and Storm kiss one another. You're kind of like, okay, cool. Is there a possibility that these two could, I don't know, get together? And so for Rogue, as we get into the third chapter, she's having a hard time believing in the fact that there could be a chance where she might be able to have her powers be, in her control, being able to touch other people, being able to kiss people like a boyfriend. It's her right now seeing like, okay, what they're saying right now is cool and all, but then also Rogue is saying, I don't believe you. Like, there's no actual way for you to help me control my abilities. And so you have them say, you know what? Take off your clothes and you'll see what we mean here in a moment. Now, I want to go ahead and get back over to Wolverine and Storm because technically in Ultimate Marvel, they did date for a period of time, but it did kind of fizzle out when you had like different writers come in and do different things when he came to Ultimate X Men. And so it's Wolverine right now saying no, but we're going to see over time that like, no, these two might go back and forth the idea of possibly dating. But it's Wolverine saying like he's just too damaged. And the reason why him and Jean Grey worked out because Jean Grey is also so damaged. Now, for Storm, she believes she is because she lost Beast. Beast had died. And so he's kind of like, yeah. And that's another reason why I can't do it, because it does seem like you're trying to use me as a way to get over your trauma. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, he does pick up the scent of Gambit and goes out his way to hopefully locate Rogue. Now, we do get back over to Rogue and also Gambit. What we're seeing at the moment is the idea of Gambit right now kind of putting Rogue through this training session. And the reason why, because the twins gave her an outfit. And this outfit, it really does help her control her abilities. And so at first, she can't believe in the idea of like, okay, you guys had found a way to control my abilities. I don't believe you. You are lying to me. But then once she does slap Gambit and realize that her powers did not activate when she had touched Gambit's face, it really did show like, no, her powers are technically in her control at the moment. That meaning that she can now officially kiss people because thanks to the outfit. Now, they do kind of explain what the outfit is doing. I'm not going to sit down, go into too much detail, but it's kind of like if you do join us, we can kind of graft this to your body, and then give you full on ability to control your powers. And so for Rogue, what she's hearing right now is honestly pretty great, right? Now, for Quiet Wolf, this whole entire storyline is built on drama, right? And so when we do switch over to the X-Men who are currently at the school, you have Iceman right now being very upset that he is not allowed to get back out there to hopefully find his girl, because he's really upset that she's out there and missing. That Wolverine and Storm are allowed to get out there, but not him. Now, he also blames Kitty Pryde for everything, even though technically he's also at fault for this as well. And so you have Cyclops being able to break up the fight between Iceman and Kitty Pryde and Dazzler as well. And you have Nightcrawlers, you have Angel, right? Yes, Angel's all like, do you guys always fight? And you have Nightcrawler say, you weren't there when Cyclops and Wolverine tried to murder one another. It's kind of like, yeah, That's right. And actually, it wasn't Nightcrawler, it was Colossus. Anyways, though, we do switch back over to, Gambit and Rogue. Now, for Rogue, it's her kind of wanting to know, like, should she actually take up their offer? Because now she has been given this chance to use her powers, but under her control finally. But she kind of feels like she did not earn it. Now, for Rogue, let's not forget, she did go through Weapon X. She was part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Like, the girl had went through a lot and done some crazy things. And so for her, she kind of feels like she did not earn the right to just have her powers be under her control. Now, for the twins, they're saying, we don't give a you know what. Like, we gave the suit, which basically means that you had agreed to join us. So now we're going to force you. Now, you have Gambit trying his best to stop them, but they say, you know what? Get out of the way, because honestly, you can't stop us either. And the thing is, because you tried to protect her and trying to allow her to leave, you have been officially let go. And so, bam, they try their best to take out Gambit. And so this kind of leads into the ending of this chapter, where you didn't have Gambit being able to destroy the suit that's on Rogue. And with that happening, the twins can no longer control her suit, which also controls her powers, which then allows Rogue to now reuse her powers again, but on the twins. And so because she touched both of the twins, she can use their powers more freely. And so now we're seeing Gambit and also Rogue working together to escape the building. The problem is that when they get outside the main part of the building, I guess, they run into, or the lobby, sorry. When they get into the lobby, they run into Wolverine. And for Logan, the dude still wants to go after Gambit. He still wants to kill off Gambit. And so as we get into the final chapter, we're really getting into the idea of seeing the different members of the X-Men who were at the school heading over into the city. Now, when they do arrive in the city, we kind of see, Iceman be that guy, right? He's all like, let's go, let's get in there fast and quick. Because for Iceman, he's trying to show that he really does care for Rogue, but at the same time, like, dude, you messed up. There's a possibility she might not go back to you. But inside the building for Wolverine, when he does confront Gambit and also Rogue, this is the man right now wanting to take down Gambit to hopefully get his chance to get Rogue back. And so you do have the two guys going to fight against one another. And when it comes to Rogue, she's trying her best to stop the both of them, but mainly Wolverine, because she knows for Logan, the dude has a chance to possibly kill Gambit. And for me personally, the whole entire book is just like energy is everywhere. People are not really trying to stay calm on this mission. Like, for example, Iceman, he wants Cyclops to go ahead and take the jet and just ram it right through the whole entire building and then just pop out and fight anybody who might be there, who might be standing in his way. But Cyclops kind of like, dude, we are in the city, one. Two, we're kind of under Shield's protection. So if we do anything wrong, she could literally just take us out of the sky in a matter of seconds. And so you have Iceman grab Nightcrawler and say, teleport me in right now. I'm going to freeze your butt off. And so you have Kurt like, okay, you know what? I don't know that happened. So yeah, Cyclops, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and teleport a guy inside to hopefully find his missing girlfriend. Except when you have Nightcrawler and Iceman get inside the building, they're confronted by the Von Strucker twins, right? And the twins got their powers back for the most part. So they are able to easily blast Nightcrawler and Iceman away. But at the same time, they also create shields as well. And I can't remember that in the main Marvel universe, if they had the ability to go out of their way to create shields around them in battle as well. But either way, they're trying to protect themselves from Iceman and Nightcrawler. But while you have all that going on, well, you still have, Gambit and Wolverine fighting against one another, technically just for Rogue, right? And so you have Wolverine kind of getting that edge over Gambit, because for Wolverine, the dude has a healing factor. But you didn't have Rogue pull out a shotgun and say, Wolverine, don't you move. Like Homegirl saying take one more move towards that man and cause him any kind of harm, it's gonna be a problem. And so it's like, whoa, Rogue, what's going on with you? But I want to go ahead and kind of skip over a few pages because you do have a story kind of just go back and forth between the two different settings. Like, for example, you do have Colossus just rush in the room for help protect Nightcrawler and Iceman, stop the twins, and you have Jean Grey begin the process saying like, you guys are going to help us to locate Rogue and then we're going to leave and leave you guys alone, because even though what you guys did was wrong, you guys have like great lawyers who go out of their way to make sure that you are well protected. What I really want to focus on is the conversation between Wolverine and Rogue, because this conversation right here is really important because you are talking about the idea of Wolverine still looking at Rogue as like that little sister. But for Rogue, she calls Wolverine an animal because she had heard the stories of what he did in the past when he was, with Weapon X, when he was with Magneto. And so it's her saying like, you are just an animal. Look at what you did. And so when Storm walks in, Wolverine's kind of like, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out. You know what? She's right. I don't have a place with you guys at all. And on top of that, I don't like you, Storm. We can't be a couple. And so he just runs off. Now for Storm, she tells Rogue like, have you lost your you-know-what? Because it's her saying, that man looked at you as a little sister. He wanted to protect you. He believed in you. And here you go being a brat. And not too long ago, you were out there trying to kill off Mr. Sinister. And I, myself, had to help you calm down. And so it's kind of like, yeah, who is really an animal here? Wolverine or possibly Rogue or both? And so you have Storm run off. Now, for me personally, I don't know how I truly feel about this part right here because it's Rogue wanting to go with Gambit. Now, we could say like, well, in the main Marvel universe, yes. In the main Marvel universe, those two characters did get together. That there makes a lot of sense over there. But when it comes to Rogue and Gambit here, they just met. And yes, they did work together to escape, but that's really it. But it's Rogue saying like, I want to go with you. I want to be with you. And so you have the two kiss. Now, while they're kissing, the rest of the X-Men do arrive. Now, we could technically say here that because of what she saw when she touched him earlier and being able to kind of look into his past a tad bit, that some things in his past does match up to what happened to her and her past. We could say that, but it's her telling the X-Men, especially Bobby, like, hey, listen, I'm out. Like, I'm gone. And yes, you were my family. We were a family, but things happen and I have to move on. And so she does. Just like that, she's now officially gone. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. And so now it's time for us to sit down and cover the Most Dangerous Game storyline. Now, this was a storyline that I did a while back, and honestly, that video did kind of blow up, but in a negative way because the way I talked back then, the way I did videos back then, where most people did not really enjoy that video, right? So it's kind of like me sitting down and doing a new start. I don't say rebirth, but like a reboot. Yeah, reboot. And so it's us sitting down and recovering the storyline once again. And also, it kind of gave us a new character that kind of felt like Marvel truly did waste in the Ultimate Marvel universe. And that would be Longshot. And so as we get into the first few pages of chapter 1 of the storyline, we really do pick up with Longshot right now on the run. Now for Longshot, it's him right now trying to get away from somebody who's a, hunter, and they're hunting him down. Now for Longshot, as we all know, the dude has like almost perfect aim. And so once he is like cornered by this hunter, you have Longshot being able to get rid of this hunter very easily. Now, once he does that, it's him like talking out loud towards a camera, because we learned here that for Longshot, he's part of a TV show. And this TV show is being run by Ultimate Mojo. Now, I will admit this already, y'all.
like Ultimate Mojo does look a kind of ridiculous, right? But it's the idea that this Mojo is kind of similar to his main Marvel Universe counterpart, running a broadcast, right? Now, we kind of learned here that for Mojo, what he's doing right now is broadcasting some kind of show over in Krakoa. Now, of course, as we all know, Krakoa in the Ultimate Marvel Universe is a regular island that's nearby Genosha, another country over there in Africa. Now, when it comes to Kitty Pryde, she was able to hack into the broadcast that's been playing this whole TV show that Mojo has across the entire country of Krakoa and Genosha as well. And so it's her right now showing this show off to Jean Grey and Cyclops. Now, with Jean Grey and Cyclops seeing this, it's Jean Grey automatically telling Charles Xavier, who's now calling for a meeting. Now, this meeting is really more Charles kind of giving us that information about Genosha, right? And we kind of get the idea that for Genosha, it's very similar to what it was over in the main Marvel universe. The idea that in that country, in the main Marvel universe, mutants are mistreated. Same thing goes over here in the Ultimate Marvel universe. Charles says that mutants over there are technically labeled as subhumans. But if you are a mutant that, commit a crime, you are easily convicted and then sent over to Krakoa, which is a smaller island off Genosha. In that jungle island, you're part of that TV show and being hunted down and killed on live television. And so when it comes to Longshot, what Charles kind of tells us here that it was a kangaroo court, that most likely that court was not really an actual court that had said, okay, yeah, Longshot, you are guilty, and now you must be sent over to Krakoa to be killed off for the crimes that you had, done. And so with all that being said, is Charles saying like, what I want to do right now is collect intel about Mojo and his whole entire broadcast. Now, for Colossus, he wants to go ahead and attack the whole entire broadcast, Mojo, bring the whole entire thing down. But it's Charles saying like, we can't do that. One, we're not part of that country. And two, that could lead to a whole lot of issues between the US and Genosha. But on top of that, we have to remember that for US, they're not going to make a move at all because not too long ago, you had, flying robots, better known as Sentinels, trying to kill off mutants left and right. And so it's Charles saying like, we have to go the safe route because we're going into another country. And so what Charles wants to do is send Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, and Kitty Pryde over to Genosha to collect intel for the whole entire broadcast. Now, the reason why those four have been selected because those four look the most like normal. Now, for Colossus, he was supposed to go as well because so angry right now, Charles said, you can't go. And Wolverine left in the last story arc and Storm tried to hunt down Wolverine as well. So just like that, the X-Men kind of have, very limited options at the moment. Now, back on the island, we do see that for Longshot, he is able to survive a tad bit more, right? And of course, that means more and more episodes for Longshot for Mojo's whole entire series. Now, for Mojo, he also has this assistant who's kind of like, hey, listen, dude, we got to get rid of Longshot because he was convicted for the crime that he had committed, that he had killed off some popular Genosha politician. So he has to go. And so for Mojo, he's saying no, because when it comes to his TV show, he loves the idea of telling a story. And the idea of Longshot being able to survive this long is kind of like bringing in great numbers for the broadcast. But it's also his assistant saying like, again, Longshot was convicted for killing off a politician over in Genosha. His family is probably getting tired of seeing their father's killer out there in the world right now, still alive and somehow surviving on your show, but also like making you money. Like, let's go ahead and just kill him off. And so now we kind of switch over to the airport, right? Now, when we do, we pick up with like the whole baggage between Iceman and Kitty Pryde. And let me explain. You see, in the last story arc, Kitty Pryde complained to Iceman about the idea of him dating Rogue because to her, it made no sense. Like, how in the world can you date somebody that you can't kiss, that you can't touch? Like, it doesn't work for her. Now, at the same time, we're all kind of like, Kitty, Are you jealous of Iceman and Rogue? But anyways, as she continued on to complain, Iceman kissed Rogue. Now, with him doing that, Iceman kissed Kitty Pryde. With that happening, Rogue saw it. Rogue punched Kitty Pryde, and then you had out of nowhere Gambit arrive. Now, you had Gambit take Rogue away, and once you have the X-Men being able to catch up to Rogue and Gambit, Rogue still decided to leave with Gambit, officially leaving the X-Men. So again, they're down a few members right now because of that whole story arc. Wolverine left, Storm left, and even Rogue left. But for Iceman, he blames Kitty Pryde for the idea of Rogue leaving. Now, is Kitty saying I am not at fault here. You're at fault. You kissed me. She saw it. She felt betrayed. She found somebody else that may be better than you, and now she's with him. So you know what? You still must treat me like a human being. But for Iceman, he's kind of ugh, I don't like you. I'm mad at you. It's your fault she's gone. But it's dude, is she at fault? Or possibly both you guys are at fault for Rogue leaving. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline where we do pick up with Colossus, Nightcrawler, and also Angel in the Danger Room, just going through a Danger Room session. Now, for Nightcrawler and Angel, they really can't go out. Nightcrawler, unfortunately, looks like a demon, and Angel, well, his wings. And so you have all three right now discussing is it the right move for Charles Xavier to only send 4 people over, but not to attack, but really more to collect intel? That for Colossus, they should go in there Rambo style, and try their best to free all the mutants who are being held right now in that crazy game being controlled by Mojo. Now you have Dazzler walk in, right? And when she walks in, she says, hey, I got an idea. There's a Blackbird still here, y'all, because again, the other 4 took a regular plane over to Genosha. So why don't we take this plane and head over? And so as we transition into the 3rd chapter, what we're seeing at the moment is the idea of Angel just trying his best to fly the Blackbird over to the island, right? To begin the process of possibly saving Longshot. Now, of course, for Angel, this is his first time flying the Blackbird, so the flight is a tad bit rocky for our heroes. Now, when it comes to Mojo, he's currently getting ready for his season finale, right? And so we see Mojo bringing in someone to kill off Longshot, and that would be Arcade. Now, when it comes to Ultimate Arcade, he had lost his sister in one of the attacks done by Magneto in the past. And so for Arcade, he's kind of listen, I can't go after Magneto. What I can do instead is go after other mutants who are out there right now. For example, the idea of Longshot. So Arcade is his hunter who's going to try his best to hunt down Arcade and officially kill him off for the show, but also for the love of killing mutants. Now, when it comes to Mojo, is him kind of thinking about the idea of going worldwide. And the reason why, because when it comes to Genosha as a whole, mutants were kicked out of that country. A few mutants still live in that country, but of course in hiding. And so with those mutants right now being grabbed left and right and being brought over to Krakoa for the show, is Mojo saying that sooner or later they're gonna run out of mutants from Genosha. And so now he's saying we should go to other prisons around the world and find mutants who have been locked away and use those mutants to continue our show. Now we do see Cyclops, Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, and also Iceman arrive in Genosha, right? And we get another scene where it's basically Kitty Pryde and also Iceman kind of having a small argument against one another. And of course, it's about the idea of they're still mad at one another. Who's at fault for the idea of Rogue leaving? You have the two of them going back and forth, but you have Jean Grey remind them hey, we are undercover. Can y'all two stop acting like, babies and get your head in the game? Now, for Dazzler and the rest of her crew, they do arrive on Krakoa. And so you have Angel decide to stay on the Blackbird while the rest of the crew continue their search around the island. Now, with that happening, we then see Mojo begin to freak out. And the reason why, because for Mojo,
he begins to lose all his cameras. Like his broadcast is now slowly being shut down. And the reason why, because, well, Colossus, Dazzler, and Nightcrawler, they are destroying different devices that are being used as cameras that help broadcast the whole entire show on the island. Now, Arcade does confront our heroes. And I kind of like this a lot because it's really more Arcade kind of showing us that he's not going to be just an easy opponent for anybody to take down, because he's able to kind of adapt to all the different kind of powers our heroes are using on him. Dazzler, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. By the end of the section, though, you have, Arcade being able to defeat them. Now, luckily for our heroes, Longshot arrives. Now for Longshot, he also has the ability of luck. And so with that ability, he's kind of able to bring down Arcade just by saying like, hey, your gun is jammed. Do not pull that trigger. Of course, Arcade does. The gun explodes, knocking out Arcade, and the day is saved for our heroes. Now, getting back over to Jean Grey's team, they're at the crime scene spot where the body was found, the politician's body who was killed off by Longshot, supposedly. And so for Iceman, we kind of see the idea. Iceman believes that Longshot did kill that guy off. But for Cyclops, he had examined all the different photos of the crime scene and kind of realized that there is a possibility that Longshot is innocent. Now, you didn't have somebody knock out Jean Grey from behind. That somebody would be Ultimate Spiral. Now, as we get into the next chapter, it's really more of us learning here that we are seeing the ultimate spiral, right? Now, quickly, you have Iceman and Cyclops kind of realize that she had to be the one who had killed off that politician that got Longshot locked up, but also sent over to Krakoa. And so it's her saying like, you don't know the full story, but it's us now saying like, well, actually, it seems like we do know the full story. Now, we do get a quick page here where it's Mojo being very upset about the idea of the show not being on air at the moment. And so right now, they're showing reruns. Like, for example, the idea how they had killed off a character known as Blink. Now, we had saw Blink back in the Ultimate New Mutant storyline, and she was supposed to head over to Emma Frost's school, but technically, she's now dead. With that being said, though, when it comes to Mojo, he says, like, you guys better hurry up and like get this thing figured out right now, or I'm killing off your family. And so we do see Colossus, Dazzler, and Nightcrawler kind of hanging out with Longshot. Now, it's really more of them kind of introducing one another, right? And it's also Longshot kind of realizing that for Colossus and Dazzler and Nightcrawler, that it's really great to see the X-Men go out of their way and try their best to save his life. Now, for Dazzler, she wants to go ahead and make her way back over to Angel. Matter of fact, speaking of Angel, we currently see Angel right now waiting at the Blackbird, right? Except while waiting at the Blackbird, he is instantly jumped by, well, unknown people. Now, when we do transition back over to Cyclops and Iceman, you have the two characters trying their best to battle against Spiral. Now, this battle does last like a few pages where it's really more Spiral being able to hold her own in this battle. Now, we see her being able to remove the visor of Cyclops and thinking that would take him off the board. Now, when it came to Cyclops, he tells us that because he lost his vision a long time ago, he had learned to kind of walk around the world without his eyesight. Even though technically now he has his vision thanks to his visor, well, it's still him saying like, if anybody ever knocks out my visor, I'll still be A-okay out there in the field. Now, for Iceman and Cyclops, they're still struggling against her, right? But luckily for our two boys, there's Jean Grey. And when it comes to Jean Grey, she's not Jean Grey right now. She's the Phoenix. But now we have to transition over to, well, Colossus, Dazzler, Longshot, and Nightcrawler. Now, they're trying to make their way over to Angel, except while doing that, a random mine goes off, and you do have our heroes being able to survive the explosive, right? But it's Colossus being very concerned for Longshot. Now, for Dazzler, she kind of hates that, and let me explain, because for Dazzler, she has been hitting on Colossus for like the longest time ever, been trying to get with him. But the thing is, she began to realize there is a possibility that Colossus
does not like women. And so she's kind of like, hey, Nightcrawler, I don't think Homeboy right now is playing on the right team. But getting back over to the Phoenix situation, really do see Jean Grey as the Phoenix being able to beat down on Spyro very easily. Now, here's the thing, because as she is talking, you have Cyclops realize the way Jean Grey is talking right now is not normal. Her voice does sound a tad bit different in a way like it sounds scarier, but also like another person is currently in the body of Jean Grey, right? And so Scott knows it's not Jean Grey. It has to be something else. It has to be the Phoenix. And so once you have Cyclops being able to have Jean Grey snap out of it, it's now time for them to interrogate Spyro. But this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, right? Because when we do switch over, we do learn that, well, Angel has been officially captured. Because when you do have Colossus, Dazzler, Nightcrawler, and Longshot get back to where Angel was supposed to be at, they realize that he's gone because Mojo left behind a small device to contact them and say, hey, listen, I have your boy. You want him? Well, come get him. And so as we get into the final chapter, the big question comes up, like, what is going to be their next move here? Like, can they possibly save Angel's life? Now, for the team, they're kind of spent because they've been on this island doing different things like fighting against Arcade. And when it comes to Nightcrawler, does he have enough energy to teleport them inside the base of Mojo? Now, with Longshot being there, they might get a tad bit, well, lucky. But while you have our heroes doing that, we do see, Jean Grey beginning to look into the mind of Spyro, trying to begin the idea of learning who she, well, actually is. But while you have Jean Grey's team doing that, we do see our heroes being able to break into the base of Mojo, right? Now, Colossus got left behind, meaning that Nightcrawler wasn't really able to carry all four of them inside. But when it comes to Longshot and, Dazzler being there, it does seem like at first they might be able to pull everything off, but Longshot does get grabbed by Mojo. And it does seem like Mojo is about to kill Longshot. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey, what we learn from her while looking into the mind of Spyro is the idea that, okay, so Spyro and also Longshot fell in love with one another. As we all know, Genosha did outlaw mutants, but they were able to kind of hide in the underground areas of Genosha. And so once they had found one another, well, they began to fall in love with one another. The problem was that for Longshot, he kind of always played things loosely, like never being serious when it came to different kind of situations around him. Like, for example, a relationship possibly getting serious. And so when it came to Longshot, he would constantly stand up Spyro. And so one night, she found that politician. Now, that politician was one of the few people who was trying to see if there is a possibility in a change in Genosha. The idea of trying to not outlaw mutants, to allow mutants to come back into Genosha. While hanging out with the mutants, he fell in love with Spyro because, again, she got stood up by Longshot. And so while you had the two of them making out, Longshot appeared and caught them, well, cheating because the politician was married. And so this kind of begins the process of us seeing the ending of the storyline because you do have Longshot being able to bring down Mojo because Dazzler, she did help out a little bit. But anyways, it was Longshot being able to bring down Mojo and also kind of free Angel as well alongside with Dazzler. Now, Colossus does arrive a tad bit too late. It's kind of like, hey guys, I'm here. What's going on? It's like, dude, you are so late. But anyways, while you do have our heroes being able to bring down Mojo, we learn from Jean Grey and her team that, yes, Longshot did kill off that politician. There's no like, maybe he was innocent. He didn't do anything. No, because Longshot did catch Spyro kissing the politician, he went ahead and killed him off. He stabbed him right then and there. So yes, Longshot is the killer. So while you do have our heroes allowing Spyro to leave, when they all go back home to school, you have Charles Xavier just going off on
Colossus, Angel, Nightcrawler, and Dazzler because one, they snuck out the Blackbird, and two, they basically helped a murderer get away from COPPA. And most likely, he went over to the Savage Land. So for S.H.I.E.L.D., it would take them months on months to just be able to hopefully locate Longshot and to get him behind bars like he should be. Now, for Charles Xavier, he wanted to kick the person out who led that team into Krakoa. Again, that was kind of like Dazzler, but you have Angel protect her. Say it was him. Now, this begins the whole idea of their relationship in Ultimate Marvel, because once you have Angel say, no, it was me, Charles changed his mind and suspending or really expelling that person from his school. So for Angel's sake, he got lucky, but also he now dating Dazzler. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now, here's the thing, because we're still covering Vaughn's run on Ultimate X-Men, but it's kind of getting into that point where we're going to see the end of his run, and then Robert Kirkman comes in. And for me personally, Robert Kirkman had the best run on Ultimate X-Men, maybe second to Brian Michael Bendis, but it can kind of go either way. But when it comes to today's storyline, Shock and Awe really does focus more on Wolverine and Storm, because remember, after Beast had died in Ultimate New Mutant storyline, well, it was the idea that for Storm, she's kind of single again, and she was trying to look for someone else to be with. And so she kind of began the process of falling in love with Wolverine. Now, for Wolverine, he did turn her down. And once you had Rogue kind of say some horrible things to Wolverine, he had left the X-Men, told Storm, do not follow me. Now, Storm, of course, did follow him, but it's the idea of these two characters out there away from the X-Men and kind of seeing their relationship beginning to blossom. Now, with all that being said, it's also us kind of getting a little history lesson when it comes to Storm's origin. You see, in this flashback, we do pick up with Storm in El Paso, Texas. Now, it's years ago, right? But we do see her currently on a motorcycle right now, trying to get away from another character, and that would be Yuri. Now, if you already know your Ultimate Marvel, you already know who Yuri is going to be here in a moment. But it's the idea that we do learn from Storm that she's from Morocco. The problem was that her family was killed back in Morocco, and she's not allowed to go back there at all, because if she does, she'll also be killed. And so for Storm, she came over to America, came over to Texas. Now, when she had arrived, she met Yuri. And when it came to Yuri, she kind of showed Storm how to survive out there in the world by, well, stealing motorcycle, cars, and also trucks. The problem was that for Storm, she realized every single time she was able to steal something to earn some money, Yuri took most of the money away from Storm, kind of saying like, because I taught you how to do these things, I own most of the money you earn. But for Storm, she said, enough is enough. I feel like I have done a lot to basically pay back every single cent I owe you for you teaching me the ways of stealing. And so Storm saying that this motorcycle will belong to me. I will sell it and get all the earnings from it. Now, for Yuri, she hates that so much because it's a motorcycle she wanted so badly. And so you have Yuri chase down Storm. The problem is that you didn't have Storm go out of her way to make it rain, because she realized that Yuri's not really great when it comes to riding a motorcycle in the middle of a rainstorm. Now, Yuri still tries to chase after Storm, leading up to the moment where you have Yuri get hit by an 18-wheeler truck. And so we're kind of left to believe the possibility that Yuri is dead. And so this leads us back over to the present day. Now, for Storm, we see her being able to locate Wolverine. Here's the problem, though, because for Logan, he's right now trying to hunt down different people who had killed off a kid. Here's the reason why. That kid was a mutant, but he kind of looked like a wild creature. And so these guys, they believed that they had killed off a wild creature, not realizing that they had killed off a young mutant. Now, for these guys, they don't really care. They're kind of like, wait, we killed a mutant. What's the big deal? But for Logan, that's the wrong thing to say. So we do see Logan going out of his way to beat down on these guys who were, well, technically responsible for killing off that kid. And so you didn't have Storm jump in the battle to help him out. Now, once you have the two characters being able to bring down all those different guys, you didn't have the two get into a car to get away before the cops had arrived. Now, for Storm, she wants to know, why did Logan leave for? But while they're driving off, they don't realize that they're being watched by somebody. Now, this person does work for Weapon X, but being led by someone else who is technically in charge of this faction of Weapon X. And we're going to learn who it is very soon. But getting back over to Storm and also Logan, you have Logan explain why he left the X-Men for, because his main focus right now is to figure out where his wife or possibly his entire family could be at. Because guys, not forget, a while ago you had S.H.I.E.L.D. hand over a wedding ring that belonged to Logan prior to Weapon X. It's the only thing left from Weapon X that belongs to Logan. And that kind of tells him in the possibility that he was married to somebody and the possibility he may have a child out there. But this kind of leads into, well, our first appearance of Ultimate Lady Deathstrike. Because while you have the two driving, you have Logan realize there's somebody standing in the middle of the road. And you did have this person being able to cut the vehicle in half. Now, the way she's talking right now, you would believe that her main target right now is Logan. But it's not Logan. Her main target right now is Storm. And so once you have Storm being able to get back up, she realized who is after her, and I guess Wolverine as well. It would be Yuri. Yuri became Lady Deathstrike. And the question is now, how in the world did she go through that transition? But as we get into the next chapter, we are given a flashback. Now, with this flashback, we do learn that in the past for Yuri, better known as Yuriko Oyama, we do learn here that after the accident, she was basically paralyzed from the neck down. But here's the thing, because she was then confronted by Dr. Cornelius. Now, for Dr. Cornelius, he did promise Yuri that he has a way to help her out, but also kind of get revenge against Storm. Now, for Yuri, she's kind of like, what's the point of you trying to transform me into some kind of weapon that could be used to go after Storm? Now, when it comes to Dr. Cornelius, he was part of Weapon X. But as we all know, Weapon X got shut down, but you still have a few people out there who are trying to continue the different projects that Weapon X had. Like, for example, the idea of Wolverine, but also grabbing other mutants and turn those mutants into weapons as well. And so for Dr. Cornelius, what he wants to do is get his hands on Wolverine. Now, it's also him telling a lie to Yuri by telling Yuri, like, listen, I know that you want to get revenge against Storm. Let me tell you, I also want to get revenge against Storm as well, because she had killed off a dear friend of mine. Now, that last part right there is technically a lie. And you'll see what I mean here in a moment. Because as we get back over to the present day, you have Yuri explain to us that thanks to the doctor, Cornelius, he was able to turn her body into a cyborg body, but also give her a healing factor thanks to Logan. Basically gave her a small piece of his gene to kind of help give her a healing factor that may be better than his own healing factor. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Lady Deathstrike, she tells us that she was informed that Storm killed off Colonel Wraith. Now, when it comes to Colonel Wraith, he did not die by Storm. He was shot by Nick Fury. Now, Storm did try to kill off Colonel Wraith because Colonel Wraith basically transformed Beast into his blue fur form. And so for Storm, she was kind of like, no, she was very upset by it because at that point, her and Beast were dating. And so Storm saying like, you were given bad information. But for Yuri, even though she was given bad information, she still hates Storm because what happened to her in the past? Being hit by an 18-wheeler truck. She blames Storm for that. And so you do have Yuri begin the process of trying to fight against, well, Wolverine and also Storm. And honestly, when it comes to the second chapter of the storyline, there's not really a lot here. Like, basically, it's really more of us seeing Storm and Wolverine working together to fight against Yuri, which honestly is a great battle and all. But again, there's not a lot here because once you do have Wolverine take down the chopper that was holding on to Dr. Cornelius, we also see Yuri being able to sneak up behind Storm. And it does seem like at first that Storm is going to get killed off by Yuri. But you did have Storm use a lightning bolt to hit the both of them. Now, Logan was able to kind of bring her back to life by doing his own version of CPR. But once he does that, Storm does pass out. But we do see Logan walk over to the body of Yuri, kind of leaving us wondering, what is Logan going to do to Yuri? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, she does not die here. She dies in the next storyline, I think, by the hands of Longshot. I could be wrong, but she does not die here. We're kind of left to believe she does because once you do have Storm wake back up, she wakes back up to school of Charles Xavier. Now, when she does wake up, she realized that it was Wolverine who had brought her back there. Now, here's the thing, because once you had Wolverine do that, he tells her like, hey, I'm leaving again. Like, I gotta go and find my wife and my missing family. But it's Storm saying like, stop running. Like, we are runners. I have always been running from my past, and here you are running to your past. Let's stop running and let's try to just be together. And so it's her saying like, begin a new life and maybe try to enjoy life for once. And so you do have Wolverine Storm possibly stay at the school of Charles Xavier, well, together. And this is where okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now, this might be a short video, and the reason why, because we're covering Ultimate X-Men Annual number 1. Now, this annual, it's really special, and the reason why, because it kills off a certain character that, again, we didn't get a chance to see much of in the Ultimate Marvel universe, and I don't understand why this person was killed off when that character was still somewhat popular in the main Marvel universe in the early 2000s. Like, it really surprised me how they killed this character off and just never brought this character back in future stories for Ultimate X-Men. So as we get into the opening pages for the storyline, we're really picking up with the Ultimate X-Men team fighting against the different villains that belong to Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, for me personally, I thought this was a real moment. And it's kind of cool because, you know, it's like, okay, you know what? It's the Ultimate X-Men finally going up against different characters that don't belong to them. You know, non-mutant characters like the Green Goblin or Doc Ock or Electro, and the list goes on. How will the X-Men be able to adapt those kind of characters with different kinds of abilities? Now, we kind of find out that they're not really fighting against the Green Goblin or Doc Ock or, you know, Sandman or anything. It's really more them right now in the Danger Room. But it's Storm saying like, as the X-Men, well, Jean Grey says it, but as the X-Men, they are peacekeepers. So their only goal is not to go after only bad mutants, but to also go after bad people who might hurt other people, and could be human or mutant. And so it's them right now just going through a training session to see if they would be able to handle the different villains of Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, while you do have our heroes going through that Danger Room session, we do see Angel and Charles Xavier, you know, having a conversation with one another, but then Angel has to leave the room. And the reason why, because Nick Fury is calling Charles. But this is really more the book trying to remind us that when it comes to Charles Xavier School, it technically does fall under the whole, like, Shield umbrella. And the reason why, because for Charles Xavier, for Nick Fury really more, Nick Fury helped Charles keep the school open when it came to Mark Millar's run. But the thing was, Nick said every single time one of your kids graduate, they'll then be pushed over to my party, the Ultimates team. And so right now for Nick Fury, it was him helping out Charles keep the school open, but it's also him saying like, I want to keep an eye on you and your fellow mutants that go to your school. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Nick Fury, the reason why he's calling out Charles is because they were trying to transport a mutant over to a Hulk prison. The problem is that there was an accident. That mutant was able to get away. Now, there was one person, had a hard time saying that was at Charles' school that kind of helped put the guy away. She gave over state's evidence. The problem is that that person is no longer there to school, and that would be Rogue. You see, back in Ultimate Cry Wolf storyline, you had Rogue leave the X-Men to go with Gambit. I'll explain why here in a moment. But it's Charles Xavier telling Nick, like, yeah, Rogue is no longer here. And Nick's kind of like, what do you mean? Like, I went through all the different hoops to make sure that you are labeled as her guardian, meaning that she is your responsibility. Where in the world did she go to? And it's him saying, like, she disappeared with somebody else. I was not there at that time where she had officially left the X-Men. I could not stop her at all. And so you then had the story go ahead and shift over to Rogue. Now, real quick, because I want to remind you guys, when it comes to Rogue, she was part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She had joined Magneto's side once you had Weapon X get shut down. And so once Weapon X was shut down, she had officially joined Magneto's side, but you didn't have the X-Men stop Magneto, and Rogue was then able to join the X-Men. Now, the reason why she left the X-Men is not just because of Gambit, but it's a whole idea that she felt like she has done so many wrong things in the past. And so she wants to get out there and do great things for the world to kind of make up for the bad things that she had done in the past. And so we see her right now with Gambit as they break into this building that belongs to the Von Strucker twins. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to re-explain who the Von Strucker twins are in this reality. If I remember correctly, they don't reappear ever again in Ultimate Marvel, but on top of that, in this storyline, we don't see them appearing again. Now, when it comes to Rogue and Gambit, they're right now trying to steal the gem of Sidorak. Now, unfortunately, you don't really have this storyline try to fully explore the idea of the gem of Sidorak in this reality, but we do learn that for the Von Strucker twins, they got this gem from Black Tom Cassidy. And again, we don't see him either in this storyline, but we do see our two young heroes being able to get their hands on this gem. Now, while they're trying to leave the area, they run into another character. And that would be the Juggernaut. Now, I know somebody in the comments section will be all like, actually, Fresh, when it comes to the Juggernaut, he's not a mutant. No, he's not a mutant in the main Marvel universe, but in the Ultimate Marvel universe, the Juggernaut is actually a mutant. Matter of fact, we first saw him back in the Weapon X storyline, where you had him and Rogue and Nightcrawler, and I want to say Sabretooth as well, be controlled and owned by Weapon X. They were basically slaves for the program. And so when it came to Juggernaut, he has been looking for Rogue. And the reason why, because back in the day, he kind of felt like there were two peas in the pods. Matter of fact, he says that he was in love with her back then, and he still is right now. And so really more him just trying to find her and get her so that they can be together. Now, of course, he does believe he understands how her powers truly work. He believes as long as her hands are covered up, she cannot absorb his abilities, not realizing that it's anywhere on her body that she touches you, she can absorb your power. So like her feet, her leg, and whatever. And so once she's able to touch him with her feet, she's then able to absorb a small portion of his power. And so we do see for a brief moment where it does seem like, okay, you know what? They can go toe to toe with one another. The problem is that she only got a small portion of his power. So he is still a tad bit stronger than her. Now, for Gambit, he does jump back into the battle. This kind of leads into that sad moment that where you had folks be like, man, why in the world would they do that to Ultimate Gambit? Because this leads into the moment where you have Gambit just throw this gem of Sidorak right at Juggernaut. Now, with him doing that, Juggernaut is now even more powerful than he was originally. And so now he became even harder for Gambit to possibly take down. And so as the battle goes on, you have our hero try everything he can to hopefully defeat the Juggernaut, but he can't. He can't win against him. And so this kind of leads into the moment where you have our two characters characters kind of take their fight over to a nearby construction building or a building under construction. And so you didn't have Gambit go ahead and bring down the entire building on top of them to hopefully stop Juggernaut and to allow Rogue at least a chance to get away. Now for Rogue, she watched the entire building fall on top of both Juggernaut and also Gambit and kind of wondering like, okay, did Gambit survive? And so she runs over to him. And this kind of leads into a different thing for Rogue in the Ultimate Marvel universe, because for Gambit, unfortunately, he does die, but he does die in the arms of Rogue, kind of saying like these two characters really did care for one another. And there was a possibility that if things had continued on, they would have been a couple for, so on and so on in the Ultimate Marvel universe. Unfortunately, Gambit dies here, so that kind of ends their relationship. But before he does officially die, you didn't have Gambit kiss Rogue. Now, we see her being able to absorb everything from his mind, but also his powers as well. And so from this point on, leading into, I want to say like Ultimate Apocalypse maybe, Rogue will now have the powers of Gambit, but also her own power as well. Because technically with him being dead, his powers have nowhere else to go to. And so you didn't have the storyline kind of end on the note where we switch over to Bobby Drake. And for Bobby Drake, it's really more the idea of Bobby getting a call from Rogue. It is Rogue saying like, she's still not coming back home to school of Charles Xavier. But it's also the book kind of telling us like when it comes to Rogue, she now again holding on to the powers of Gambit, but also having his memories as well. Now, I think earlier I said like she has his powers and hers. There's going to be a brief moment in time where her actual powers are canceled out by holding on to the powers of Gambit. So when it comes to Ultimate X-Men, right, there are like 4 major runs on this book. You had Mark Millar at first, Brian Michael Bendis, you didn't have Brian Vaughan, and then last Robert Kirkman. There was a 5th writer, but like, I don't really count him. And nothing against him, but he kind of came at the end to help lead into Ultimatum, and that was really it. And so when it comes to the main 4 writers of Ultimate X-Men, for me personally, Brian Vaughan was kind of the weakest out of 4. Now, it's not me saying like, oh my God, it's horrible, skip over it. No, I kind of felt like it was just okay. For me, this was like his second best storyline. For me, it was Cry Wolf that was his best, but this right here for me was really his best storyline, but also bringing Magneto back into the picture again. And so as we get into the opening pages for Ultimate X-Men Magnetic North Part 1, we pick up with Wolverine. Now, it's Wolverine at the moment right now being brought back into the X-Men. It's Charles Xavier saying like, welcome back, because for Wolverine, out of the idea of Cry Wolf, Wolverine just ran off. Like, after being hurt by Rogue, emotionally, he went out in the world to hopefully find his wife and his son. Now, he was brought back by Storm, who just flat out begged him to come back to the X-Men, which he did, but also because she began to grow feelings for him as well. You had Wolverine being able to come back over to the X-Men to be with Charles Xavier and the rest of the team. Now, we'll give Brian Vaughan some prop here, and let me explain. Because for Brian Vaughan, what he did was bring in that teenage drama into the book, which for me personally is kind of needed when you're dealing with teenage characters. Because for Mark Millar and Brian Michael Bendis, there for me was like straight to the point of they have some big things happening against some kind of secret organization or the next big bad guy, and that was really it. And so for Brian Vaughan, it's kind of cool to see him bring in that teenage drama, right? And so what we're seeing at the moment is the idea of Brian Vaughan bringing up Kitty Pryde and Bobby Drake's relationship. Because in the early part of his run, it was established that Rogue was dating Iceman. Now for Rogue, she left the X-Men to go be with Gambit. And so with that door being open, it allowed Bobby to date somebody else, like Kitty Pryde. The problem is that when it came to Gambit, he died. But Rogue had absorbed his powers, but also had been on the road emailing Bobby Drake. Now, the problem for Bobby is that he has been emailing her back, but he CC'd Kitty Pryde. So, of course, she saw the last email that he had sent. The idea of saying like how much he misses her and wants her to come back to the X-Men, and the idea that he may still have some feelings for her. So of course, you have Kitty Pryde being very upset and just going off on Bobby. But again, it's the idea of bringing in that teenage drama. And you have Cyclops and Jean Grey kind of watching this, because you had Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Iceman going through a Danger Room session to only be interrupted by Kitty Pryde and Bobby Drake's like whole drama. And so you have Jean Grey say like, come on, you know how it is, Scott. Like, they're teenagers. It's gonna happen. Like, come on. Like, Scott, I already know you must have dated somebody else prior to me, right? And you must have your own kind of teenage drama with that girl as well. And that leads us over to Polaris. Now, when it comes to Polaris, her, Havoc, Sunspot, and also Northstar, they all go to Emma Frost School, the Academy of Tomorrow. Now, let's not forget, for Emma Frost, she kind of wants to do things differently when it comes to Charles Xavier. The idea that she wants to try to build the actual bond between mutants and humans in a way of kind of teaching humans how mutants can be good and not really be a force of evil. And so it's Sunspot's first day at a school, but you didn't have Northstar appear saying there's a fire nearby in the town. And so you have Emma Frost send her team out there to go help deal with that fire. That'll be Northstar, Polaris, and also Havoc. This begins the whole idea of Magnetic North. Because once you do have, the 3 students arrive at the fire to help the firefighters put the fire out, also get people out of the fire, you have Havoc tell Polaris kind of use her powers to prevent the building from collapsing on innocent bystanders. Just like that, her powers go wild and crazy to the point where she has cars, other vehicles flying all over the place, crushing innocent firefighters. And it seems like there's no way to cancel her powers out. And so you have Havoc no choice but to use his powers on his girlfriend to knock her out, to prevent the idea of her continuing to kill different people in the area. And so that leads us over to Nick Fury. Now, for Nick Fury, it's him right now just in his jet flying who knows where, but then gets a call from Dum Dum Dugan. Now, it's Dum Dum saying like, hey, listen, bro, so we got this young mutant. She has magnetic powers. Her powers went crazy. She was knocked out. We're moving in to take her into a prison cell because she did kill off a few people. Now, for Nick Fury, he's kind of wondering, why in the world are you calling me for? And it's Dum Dum saying like, well, the reason I'm calling you because we got to put her in the one cell we have that's currently occupied. And of course, that cell is being occupied by no other than Magneto. Now, once we do switch over to the Savage Land, we do pick up with Longshot. Now, for Longshot, he's kind of on the run because let's not forget that he was in Genosha, but he did kill off somebody. So technically, Homeboy is a murderer. Now, for the X-Men, they didn't know he was an actual killer, and they had saved him from the idea of the Krakoa TV show. When it comes to Longshot, though, he's hiding out in the Savage Land, but unfortunately, he is founded by the Scarlet Witch. And so once you do have the Scarlet Witch find him, she brings him down very easily, and just like that, because she is part of the Ultimates, he's now under arrest by S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, getting back over to Emma Frost students, you have Havoc being very upset with, well, Emma Frost. And the reason why, because she allows S.H.I.E.L.D. to take away Polaris. Now, for Emma Frost, she had no choice there. Because again, Polaris' powers did go out of control, but she did kill off people. And so it's Emma Frost saying, I did not have a choice. It was take her or take us all. I'm trying my best right now to protect all of our students back at our school. And so you can tell that for Emma Frost, she understands how Havoc's currently feeling, because for Havoc, his girlfriend was just taken away. But at the same time, though, it's like, dude, what did you want me to do? There is no way I could have possibly helped her in that kind of situation. And that leads us back over to Polaris, who's now currently in the same prison with Magneto. Now, of course, this kind of begins the idea of the possibility, what if Magneto had planned all of this? Because now he has somebody else who's just like him in the same room with him. And so now it's Magneto beginning the process of possibly trying to get her to go onto his side, trying to reason with her, to make it feel like he understands what she's currently going through, but at the same time, make her begin to understand how he feels about humans and his idea of how to save the mutant race. Now, Magneto is being watched like almost 24/7. Right now, his own son is currently watching him. Now, we do switch over to Emma Frost, who does call out Charles Xavier. Now, I realize something. Every single time Emma Frost goes through something, she always calls out Charles Xavier. And for always a brief moment, it does seem like, okay, you're right, Charles. I should have done things the way you have done things when it comes to building a better world for both mutants and humans. And then literally by the end of the storyline, she goes back to her old ways. That's just me, but that's what I kind of realized. But anyways, it's her telling Charles what happened to Polaris. Now for Charles, he already knows where most likely they have placed Polaris, in the same cell that he had built for Magneto. Now it's Charles also telling Emma we got to make sure that no one else finds out about the idea of where they have placed her. Now, when it comes to Cypher, he was able to listen in on the conversation between Emma Frost and also Charles Xavier. And so now him and 4 other characters, Sunspot, Havoc, Northstar, and Cannonball, now they all know where Polaris is currently being held at, of course, with Magneto. And so it's Havoc saying hey, let's go ahead and break her out. Let's get my girlfriend back. Now, again, they have to break into the base belonging to the Ultimates. It's the idea of going against Iron Man, Thor, and Black Widow, and Captain America. Can these young boys really be able to bring down the Ultimates to just get in there and break their girlfriend out? Now, at the same time, they're not thinking about all the consequences that can come out of this whole idea of trying to break someone out of a prison. Now, when it comes to Charles Xavier, he already knows what's about to happen. The idea of Havoc and his team going to try to break out Polaris out of the base of the Ultimates. And so what he wants to do is build a 2-team plan here. The first team will go out of their way to hopefully stop Havoc and his team. But if that team fails, the second team will be right outside the base of the Ultimates to hopefully stop Havoc from being able to break out Polaris. Now, this is where we kind of learn the past of Cyclops here, that he had dated Polaris first. The problem was that he was all about school, and so she left him and, began to date his brother, Havoc. And so for Jean Grey, she's kind of wait, why in the world did you never tell me about this? And so this right here may be a small issue in their relationship, but you did have the X-Men move out to hopefully stop Havoc. Now, to close on this chapter, we do switch over to 2 characters, and now we Forge, and we're getting our first appearance of Mystique in this reality, because you have the 2 of them right now trying to move a device into a truck. And we kind of learn here that Forge had created some kind of device that would make Polaris' powers go out of control. So just like that, we already know Polaris is now innocent. But we also now know for Forge, who's still part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, just like Mystique here, that means all of this is being done by some master plan built up by Magneto. And so just like that, we now have the idea that Magneto will try to bring Polaris over to his side.
Now, when it comes to the opening pages of the 3rd chapter, we see that Jean Grey has gone into the mind of Cyclops. Now, here's the reason why. Because she's kind of wondering in the possibility if Cyclops still has feelings for Polaris. It's also her kind of wondering, why he never told Jean Grey about Polaris. Now, she's wondering right now if Charles Xavier is once again controlling the mind of Cyclops to kind of make him go out of his way to break out Polaris. But for Cyclops, kind of no, there's no way that Charles would do that. But also, she is the past. It's him right now trying to, comfort Jean Grey, to make her understand that that's the past. That his main goal right now is to focus on her, but also this mission, which is right now to stop his brother. And we also learn here that for Nick Fury, he has been holding on to the recent villains for the Ultimate X-Men. So Lady Deathstrike, Mr. Sinister, and now Longshot also being added in the ranks of this place. Now, of course, we might see these characters break out sooner or later in the later parts of Ultimate X-Men, but we did switch over to Magneto. Now, when it comes to Magneto, it's really more him trying to, again, continue the idea of bringing Polaris over to his side by basically saying, like, when it comes to him killing off innocent humans, it's really more him trying to help out his fellow brothers, meaning that trying to help out his fellow mutants. And so it's him right now trying to make her understand that even though she did kill off some humans, in the long run, she may have been able to help out the mutant race. Now, for Polaris, she hates the idea that she had killed off some regular humans. But again, for Magneto, it's him right now trying to slowly begin the process of bringing her over. Now, when it comes to Cyclops' X-Men team, we see them being able to confront Havoc, right? And so once they do confront Havoc, it leads into this battle. Now, this for me is kind of the reason I kind of hate the X-Men sometimes, because I kind of feel like in the main Marvel universe, even the Ultimate Marvel universe, the X-Men will lose in the most ridiculous kind of ways. Because like right now, for the Ultimate X-Men, like I feel like with Cyclops, Wolverine, Storm, and also Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler, they should have been able to bring down Havoc's team. By the end of the battle though, unfortunately, we see that Havoc's team was able to win very easily against Cyclops in a matter of like a few pages. And that was really it. Now, even though the battle didn't end with most of Havoc's team being taken down, we see Northstar and Havoc continue on to head over to the base of the Ultimates. But they're being watched by Mystique and also by Forge. Now for Forge, he kind of feels like they should go ahead and get rid of Northstar and also Havoc. But Mystique says no, those two are part of the plan as well. Now you do have Cyclops call up Jean Grey to warn her like, hey, we failed. Now for Jean Grey, she's still very confident about the idea of being able to stop Havoc. But here's the thing, because she's not alone, because you have another team right now that also kind of feels very confident about the idea of stopping Havoc, and that will be the Ultimates.
But now we have to switch over to Doug Ramsey and also Emma Frost. Now, when we do, it's really more where you have Doug Ramsey be a hero in a way, because it's Doug Ramsey right now looking in the cameras from the same night Polaris powers had went out of control. Now, with him doing that, he had discovered that Forge and Mystique had a machine nearby that made her powers go out of control. And so showing that video footage over to Emma Frost, she's kind of like, oh my God, I have to show Nick Fury about this video that basically proves that Polaris is innocent. But getting back over to Jean Grey's team, we see Jean Grey's team right now with the Ultimates. Now, let's not forget that this storyline does take place after Ultimate Nightmare. Ultimate Nightmare was part of this trilogy for Ultimate Galactus, and really the later chapters are kind of okay, but Ultimate Nightmare was amazing to me personally. But when it comes to our heroes right now, they have now officially lost to the Ultimates twice now. Ultimate War and Ultimate Nightmare. But when it comes to the Ultimates, they're like, listen, we beat y'all twice. We can right now beat y'all again. Just get out of here, because this is our base, which means it's our responsibility to take down anybody who tries to attack our base to break someone free. Now for Jean Grey, she's like, dude, we're just here to help out. And that's really it. Now, you also have the X-Men find out that Polaris is being held in the same prison with Magneto. That's pretty huge, because for the X-Men, Charles Xavier did not tell them that. And so you're now seeing the X-Men beginning to believe in the possibility that Charles is not telling them a lot of different things. Now, when it comes to Polaris and Magneto, like I said in the first 3 chapters, right, we kind of saw Magneto kind of showing us he's trying his best to get Polaris to come over to his side. And at first, it did seem like everything he was saying could have possibly worked. But of course, it doesn't work out, because for Polaris, she still knows that this man is one crazy. But the idea this man is now trying to break out and continue his whole idea of bringing down the human race, she's like, yeah, nope, not going to happen. I am not going to join your side at all. And so you have Magneto knock out Polaris and, well, gets ready to be broken free by Mystique and Forge. But while you have that happening outside the base of the Ultimates, it's now the Ultimates fighting against the X-Men, who are also fighting against Northstar and Havoc. Now, Northstar and Havoc kind of have a cool plan here to make both parties take each other out and then come in at the very last second to finish off the last few people from both parties. And so by the time you get to the end of this battle, the Ultimates and the X-Men had basically taken out most of their teams, and then the last few were taken out by Havoc and also Northstar. So now they're able to continue on with their plans to hopefully free Polaris. Now, when it comes to Angel and Dazzler, they were told by Charles Xavier to not really get involved in the storyline. They don't follow directions. So you have those two still flying over the entire battle happening between the Ultimates and the X-Men. Now, these two got some brains here. Like, listen, that seems like that right there is a distraction. The real action right now is inside the actual building of the Ultimates. And so you have Dazzler and also Angel go inside the place. Now, that is a problem. Here's the reason why. Because you have Mystique and Forge being able to break into the base of the Ultimates, get to Magneto, and then open up his cell. So just like that, Magneto is free. And so now for Magneto, he can now begin the process of trying to escape. And so for Dazzler and Angel, they're in the bottom part of the place. And that's a problem because that's where Mr. Sinister or Lady Deathstrike or Longshot are being held at, right? With Magneto right now just using his powers to help the process of escaping, well, for Dazzler, all the different piercings on her face just get pulled off because they're metal, right? But here's the thing though, they're still down there with the cells of like Lady Deathstrike and Mr. Sinister and Longshot. And so with Magneto just going crazy, those cells turn off. Lady Deathstrike is free, and she found out that Dazzler and Angel are friends with Storm, and she hates Storm with a flaming passion. And so you have Lady Deathstrike say, stop. And so we're kind of left to believe that there's now a possibility Dazzler is going to die. Now, as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, what we're seeing right now is really more of Magneto and, Mystique, Forge, and, well, Polaris about to leave the base of the Ultimates. Now, while they're doing that, for Magneto, it's him kind of bringing up the supposed origin to Mystique, the idea that she was a love interest to Charles Xavier, but he chose Emma Frost over her. So it's Magneto kind of wondering, is she really loyal to him, or she's only doing this as a way to get back at Charles Xavier? But it's now time for Magneto's plan to continue on. Now, getting back over to the Dazzler situation, we do see, Angel and Dazzler be saved by Lady Deathstrike. Sorry, not saved by her. Saved by Longshot, who snuck up on Lady Deathstrike and just snapped her neck. Now, of course, we already know the most likely she's not dead. But when it comes to Angel, he's then able to carry, Dazzler away. Now, while doing that, you have, Longshot run into Mr. Sinister. Now, when he does, it's Mr. Sinister saying, Apocalypse is coming soon. Now, of course, he will come, but not for another 30 issues in the Ultimate Universe. But then somebody does sneak up on Longshot. But this kind of leads into the whole battle situation between Magneto, Northstar, Havoc, and also the X-Men as well. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole entire battle to you guys. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and jump to the end of the battle, because by the end of the battle, Magneto is once again defeated. Now, with that being said, you didn't have Nick Fury arrive last minute, like always. It is him right now wanting to arrest Havoc. Now, the reason why, because Polaris, everyone now knows that she's basically innocent, that she was framed, but they want to go ahead and arrest Havoc. Now, the reason why, because
Havoc did kind of help the whole idea of allowing Magneto to escape in the first place. But you didn't have Wolverine step in. And the reason why, because Wolverine said, you're going to let everyone go, because if you don't, I'll go to the White House and tell the White House what you had me do to that boy in the cave a year ago. Kind of hinting at the early days, really the last part of Brian Michael Bendis' run on Ultimate X-Men, where you had Wolverine kill off a boy who had a mutant ability that has killed anybody who's in range of him. But anyways, you didn't have Nick Fury say, fine, you know what? You are now officially able to go. But tell Charles Xavier this. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the X-Men are officially done. We no longer have a relationship with one another. Now for Angel, he does appear holding on to Dazzler, and we're kind of left to believe the possibility that she may die. And so this kind of leads into things being set up for the future stories of Ultimate X-Men, because when it comes to Angel, you have Charles say, listen, I have an idea. Like, I want to give you a consequence for what you did. The idea of sneaking out of school after I told you and her both you are not allowed to go on this mission. So I'm going to expel you, but I want you to go undercover at Emma Frost's school. Now for Angel, he does agree, but he does ask Charles to re-enroll Dazzler because she needs the X-Men. She needs family. She needs people close to her at the moment. But this kind of leads into other storylines being set up as well. Like, for example, when it comes to Colossus, right? He does get invited to homecoming at Emma Frost's school, but by Northstar, because in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, Colossus is gay. But on top of that, Colossus is now dating another gay man. And so when it comes to Nightcrawler, we see here that he's not okay with the idea of Colossus, one, being gay, but also dating another man. Now, right after you have Nightcrawler leave, Rogue comes home. So just like that, Rogue will now most likely be rejoining the X-Men. But there's still one thing left to talk about, because you have Magneto back in his prison, right? And you have Emma Frost trying to, give him a lecture. But by the end of this section, we realize this is not Magneto. That in reality, it's Mystique right now pretending to be Magneto, who's in prison currently. Now the question is, where is the real Magneto? Well, we see here that him and Longshot have made it over to the Savage Land. So just like that, Magneto is once again free. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. Now, we finished Brian Vaughn's run Ultimate X-Men, and now we're getting into, Robert Kirkman's run on Ultimate X-Men. Now, here's the thing, because when it came to me collecting Ultimate X-Men, I did kind of jump around at a young age, like just finding random issues to collect. And if I remember correctly, Date Night, like part 2, I want to say, was one of the first few issues I had collected when it came to Ultimate X-Men. So like I had part 2, didn't have part 1 nor 3. And then I think I had the Cable issue next. It was pretty wild for me collecting Ultimate X-Men. And after a while I had every single issue. So issue number 5, which I got in a trade. But anyways, Date Night is the beginning of, Robert Kirkman's run on Ultimate X-Men, but also kind of beginning this whole brand new era for Ultimate X-Men. And you see what I mean as we go through, for me personally, the best time of Ultimate X-Men leading into Apocalypse. And so as we get into the opening pages for the first chapter of the storyline, we do pick up with everyone going out for the night. Hence the name Date Night. Like Charles Xavier, the dude has a date for the night. Cyclops, Jean Grey, they got a date tonight. Wolverine and Storm, same thing with them as well too. Kitty Pryde, she's dating Peter Parker around this time in Marvel Comics. So everyone is going out for the night, right? Except for 2 people, Bobby Drake and Rogue. Those 2 going to stay behind for the night, and we're going to slowly see the 2 characters get back together again, because let's not forget, at the end of Cry Wolf, you had Rogue leave the X-Men to go be with Gambit, but then he died. But right before he did die for Rogue, she was then able to absorb his powers. So she's now basically Gambit, but also back with the X-Men. Now, for Colossus and Nightcrawler, they're also going out for the night as well too, but they're heading over to the hospital to pay Dazzler a visit because in our last video, Dazzler got stabbed by Lady Deathstrike. But anyways, though, when it comes for our heroes, they all got plans for the night, hence the name Date Night. Now, it was also Robert Kirkman kind of beginning to build blocks for later storylines that he was going to do. Like, for example, the idea of the magician. Now, for his character, I kind of felt like Marvel could have done a whole lot more with his character, but unfortunately, they did not. Now, when it comes to him right now, it's him appearing in some random house, in an empty house, wondering where in the world he's at right now, but also where is his parents. But now we got to switch over to Charles Xavier. Now here's the reason why, because we're going to learn like, who is Charles Xavier's date for the night? Well, it will be no other than Lilandra. Now, here's the thing, because in the main Marvel universe, I always called her his space girlfriend. And the reason why, because she was the leader of the Shi'ar Empire. Now, in this reality, she is just a regular human being, but her goal right now is to help fund the school. Here's the reason why, because in the early days of Ultimate X-Men, it was the Hellfire Club, right? The Hellfire Club was really helping out the school out in the early days. But the reason why, because they wanted to turn Jean Grey into the Phoenix. Where, of course, they did, but then she killed every single member off. Now, with that happening, you then had Nick Fury step in and say, hey, your school now has the backing of the American government, but also S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. That all ended in our last video, Magnetic North, where you basically had Wolverine say like, you owe me one because I helped you out with a different kind of mission. And so for Nick Fury, he allowed the, young X-Men team to go, but he also said like, we are officially done. I am tired of trying to back the school up and everything. And so with that happening, the school no longer has the funding it used to have. And so it's now her saying, listen, my organization wants to help fund the school. Now, I want to go ahead and switch over to Nightcrawler and Colossus. Here's the reason why, because like I said earlier, we're going to see the downfall to Nightcrawler here in a brief moment when it comes to Robert Kirkman's run. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it came to like Mark Millar's and Brian Michael Bendis, even like, Brian Vaughn's run on Ultimate X-Men, those writers kind of left Nightcrawler over there. Like, he was around, he was used a few times, but he didn't really play a major role in the storyline. And so it's Robert Kirkman saying like, no, it's time to kind of like use all these different characters a tad bit more. And so when it comes to Nightcrawler, we kind of find out that the dude had a crush on Dazzler. And he's kind of upset about the idea that Dazzler chose Angel over him. Now, we also learn here that there's a possibility that Nightcrawler does not like Colossus anymore. And the reason why, because Colossus is gay. Now, getting back over to Rogue and also Iceman, like I said earlier, when it came to Rogue, when it came to the X-Men Annual, right before Gambit had died, him and Rogue had kissed. Now, with that kiss, she was then able to officially absorb his entire power set. So, like, now she's officially Gambit at the moment. And so, with her now being Gambit, it now allows her the chance to touch Bobby. And so, now they can officially make out and do so many other things now together. Now, when it comes to Lilandra, we also learn here that, yes, she's still part of the Shi'ar, but not the Shi'ar Empire. In this reality, it's the Church of the Shi'ar. So it's a tad bit different here, right? But again, she still wants to help Charles Xavier out when it comes to the school funding. The question is now is like, okay, how is she going to do that? The storyline is also kind of bringing back a certain character, and that would be Sabretooth. Now, the last time we saw Sabretooth, his head was cut off clean by Wolverine. So now the question is, how in the world is he back right now, standing right in front of Storm and Wolverine? Well, before we kind of explore that, go ahead and switch over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. And the reason why, because we see Jean Grey kind of getting very upset with Cyclops. And the reason why, because she feels like she has to do all the work in the relationship. Like she wants to be more spontaneous, go out there, make some moves on her.
And so it's her saying like, dude, can you at least make one single move on me here? Like, I'm doing all the work. And so it's Cyclops realizing that he can no longer be that scared boy when it comes to their relationship. Now, to kind of close on the first chapter of the storyline, we do switch over to the magician. Now, when we do, it's really more him kind of just, walking around his random house looking for his parents. And he does find his parents, but they are dead. And the question is now, who had killed off his parents and why in the world is he here right now at this school? And so as we get into the next chapter, what we're seeing right now is us picking up once again with the magician character that Robert Kirkman is going to really introduce in like the next 2 or 3 story arcs down the road. But for right now, it's the idea that right now he has no idea what's happening. He finds the dead bodies of his parents, and then out of nowhere, police arrive. But then when he looks up, everything is gone. The police, the parents, the house, everything is gone, and he's now standing in the middle of the field. Now, when we do switch over to Wolverine and Storm, it's the idea that right now they're confronted by Sabretooth. Now, the last time we saw this character was back in the Weapon X storyline. So we were kind of left to believe back then that when it came to Sabretooth, he was officially killed off. That you had Wolverine cut the head off of Sabretooth. To only kind of find out that's not the case at all. That in reality, Sabretooth has somehow, survived. And we kind of find out that the way he has survived is because there were a few strings of his body still attached to his head. And those few strings of skin or whatever was able to reattach his head to his body and bring him back to life again. Now, he's also here to have a conversation with Wolverine. The problem is that for Wolverine, he does not believe that Sabretooth is here for a conversation because Wolverine knows how dangerous Sabretooth can actually be. Now, as the battle goes on, you have Sabretooth being able to dodge Wolverine and Storm attack and also get his hands on Storm. But he's kind of like, listen, I won't kill her because I didn't come here to fight against you guys. You attacked me. I only came here to have a conversation with you. But now we had to switch over to Leandra, who's trying to explain things to Charles Xavier, the idea of the Shi'ar in this reality. Now, again, it's a church. It's a massive organization where they believe everyone should be equal to one another. That includes mutants as well. And so when it comes to her, she's done her research. She knows almost everything about the X Men and also Charles Xavier. She also tells us here that they have different members in different organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D. out there in the world. And so it's her right now saying like, we know what you guys are currently missing. Like, for example, the idea of a new X-Wing. And so it's her trying to buy Charles Xavier in. Now, I want to go ahead and switch over to Colossus and Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because it's Colossus kind of confirming for us what we already know when it comes to Nightcrawler and why he's acting weird around Colossus. The idea that Colossus is, gay. And so for Nightcrawler, he's having a hard time adjusting to the idea of his supposed best friend being gay. It's Colossus right now saying like, dude, listen, I don't like you like that. I like you as a friend. But still, for Nightcrawler, it's still somewhat weird. Now, this kind of leads into a very interesting turn when it comes to Sabretooth and Wolverine. The reason why, because you have Sabretooth explain that while he was, being healed up by his healing factor and everything, he began to realize something, that everything he had learned or heard while being part of an X was basically a lie. That all the different files that he had read about Wolverine was a lie. That in reality, there is a connection between the two of them. Like, for example, their healing factors. Or another example, how they both were able to survive the adamantium process. But it's Sabretooth saying there's more to it. He said, listen, when you had escaped the first time, they brought me in. And the reason why, because they realized they could use me to replace you. But you know why they chose me to replace you? It's because I am your son.
Now, getting back over to Charles Xavier and also Lilandra, we kind of learn here that for her character, she explains that what their church, who's their God for their church. And she says, we only praise one God. Now, this God will not give us an afterlife, but this God has been around since the birth of this planet. That right there, getting a hint of the idea of who she's talking about, because she says, we only praise one God. That one God will be no other than the Phoenix. But as we get into the final chapter of today's storyline, we do see Charles Xavier beginning to question Lilandra, kind of figure out what is her end goal? Because she did say that she does praise a God, that God would be the Phoenix. Now, this was also Marvel trying to begin to explain the origin of the Phoenix in the Ultimate Marvel universe. But with that being said, before we see the actual origin, we switch over to Nick Fury. Because with Nick Fury trying to chase down our new mutant, we do learn the name for this character finally. And that would be Elliot Boggs. Now, when it comes to Elliot, like I said earlier, he does disappear the few story arcs, but he does have the ability of reality warping, it seems. And so when it comes to Nick Fury and also S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, they're having a hard time trying to capture this kid. He's doing all different types of things, making it hard for Nick Fury to at least capture him. But getting back over to the origin of the Phoenix, we kind of learn here by Lilandra that the Phoenix was the birth of the universe, that it built the stars, it made the planets, it made the lives on the different planets across the universe. The problem was that the different species across the universe, they began to advance in technology and weapons. And so they got jealous of the Phoenix, went out of their way to basically capture the Phoenix. Now, they were able to do that, right? But the thing was, they put the Phoenix in a special cage. That special cage is no other than Earth. And so over time, Earth was made around the Phoenix. And so, of course, with the Phoenix being there, life began to grow on Earth and evolve on Earth. And so it's kind of Marvel at the time hinting at the idea of the possibility that the Phoenix is responsible for the mutant race being the next step in the evolution of Earth. Now, with all that being said, she's also believing that when it came to the Phoenix, it was told that sooner or later, someone would become the avatar for the Phoenix. And we already know who that is. It would be Jean Grey. Now, we do get a page where we do see, date night's going well for everybody else. For example, Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're doing good. Rogue and Iceman, they did, the dirty. But when it comes to Wolverine having a hard time believing in the idea that basically Sabretooth could be his son. But when it comes to Sabretooth, he already said what he wanted to say towards Wolverine. So now this leads into a battle between the two characters, right? And so you do have Sabretooth just wanting to fight against Wolverine, but you didn't have Storm using her powers kind of send Sabretooth away. Now, there is a special reason why he just gave up that easily and ran off, but we'll find out at the very end of this storyline. Because before we see the actual end of the storyline, we do switch over to the school of Charles Xavier, whereas everybody just coming back home for the night. Now, when Kitty Pryde walks in, we see Nick Fury with all his S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and also Elliot there as well. It's the idea of Nick Fury saying, listen, I'm passing Elliot off to you guys. Now, again, when it comes to Nick Fury and the X Men, they are no longer on good terms thanks to the Magnetic North storyline. But it's the idea the student right now, or this child, this mutant, needs someone to teach him how to control his abilities. Because right now, this young man has the ability to warp reality around him. And that is kind of dangerous to be out in the world without any kind of control. And so you have Charles at first kind of question it, but then you have Charles say, fine, he can stay here. Now, getting into the actual ending of this storyline, you see, when it came to Sabretooth earlier, the reason why he went out of his way to find Wolverine and tell Wolverine, hey, I'm your son, is because he wanted to keep Wolverine distracted long enough so that Dr. Cornelius and his people could grab a good sample from Wolverine. Because when it came to Wolverine and Sabretooth fighting against one another, of course, a part of Wolverine got cut off somewhere. Now, guys, remember, when it comes to the Dr. Cornelius, he was part of Weapon X. And so it's right now him trying to restart the whole idea of the Weapon X program and possibly make their own Wolverine in a way. Now, for me personally, I thought, okay, they're going to try to make X-23 in this reality in some kind of way. But honestly, if I remember correctly, this storyline right here goes nowhere.
Okay, so I have gone through Ultimate X-Men many times growing up. And honestly, for me, like, out of all the different Ultimate books, Spider-Man and the X-Men were my favorite two books. Like, they were, for me personally, really great. But when it came to Robert Kirkman, I kind of got the idea that every single story arc that he was working on was leading into the Apocalypse storyline. And so in the early days of his run, it was really more him trying to establish the idea of the Phoenix in the Ultimate Marvel universe. Now hear me out, because for the Phoenix, she has appeared a couple of times prior to Robert Kirkman's run on Ultimate X-Men. But in those earlier appearances, you only get like small tastes of the idea of the Phoenix, but not the actual true origin of the character. So when it came to the last story arc, the first story of his run, we kind of got an origin of the Phoenix in the Ultimate Marvel universe. But now it's time for him to kind of build on that, right? And so getting into part 1, Phoenix question mark, we pick up with Angel. Now, in the last story arc, we saw Charles Xavier tell Angel, hey, you're going undercover. Like, only you and I know that you're undercover. I'm going to send you over to Emma Frost's school. And what I want you to do is kind of watch everything. Gather intel on Emma Frost and her school and get it back over to me. Now, for the rest of the X-Men, they believe that for Charles Xavier, he has sent Angel away. Like, Angel is no longer welcome at a school of Charles Xavier. But in reality, like, no. It's him saying, hey, I'm going to stay undercover, but you can't tell anybody there at all. Now, once you do have Angel and Charles finish their conversation, Jean Grey walks in, right? Now, when Jean Grey walks in, it's really more Charles Xavier wanting to use Jean Grey power and his powers to go into the mind of Elliot. Now, we met Elliot in the first story arc of Robert Kirkman's run on Ultimate X-Men, the last story arc, actually. And so when it came to Elliot, his powers had manifested, but he wasn't really able to control his abilities. So he killed all his parents and did all these different kinds of reality warping events around him. Now, S.H.I.E.L.D. was able to knock him out and then bring him over to Charles Xavier's school, hoping that Charles can help him understand how to control his powers. And so for Charles and Jean Grey, they went into his mind to explain everything to him, like, hey, listen, your powers manifested, but unfortunately, you had killed off your parents. S.H.I.E.L.D. knocked you out and brought you to us to hopefully help you understand how to control your abilities. Now, while you do have Elliot realize what's happening, you then have Cyclops walk into the room and Charles say, hey, Scott, can you go ahead and show, this new guy around the school, Elliot here, is showing what might be an X-Men or showing what the school is going to be like for him. Now, while you have Scott and Elliot leave, you did have Charles inform Jean Grey that they got to talk about something else. Because in the last story arc, we had talked about the idea that for Charles Xavier, he's looking for someone else to kind of help fund the school. At first, he had the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club only fund the school as a way to, well, get their hands on the Phoenix, Jean Grey. But then once you have Phoenix kill off the different members of the Hellfire Club, S.H.I.E.L.D. has stepped in. But the problem was you had S.H.I.E.L.D. and X-Men kind of disagree on a few things, and so S.H.I.E.L.D. is no longer funding the school. And so for Charles, he needed someone else to help fund the school, and he found Leandra, who's part of the Church of the Shi'ar. And so she agreed to help fund the school, except she wants the church to study Jean Grey even more, because Jean Grey could possibly be the actual avatar of the Phoenix, their god. And so it's Charles saying, like, listen, we need to kind of work with them, kind of help get a full understanding of what you are, who you are, because right now you could be the avatar for the Phoenix. Now we do switch over to Wolverine and Rogue. Now for Rogue, let's not forget that a while ago, she had left the X-Men and kind of ran away with Gambit. Now, shortly after he died, but before he did die, you had Rogue and Gambit kiss. Now, once they had kissed, you then had all the powers of Gambit go over to Rogue. And so now she has the ability to touch people, but also use the powers of Gambit as well. Now for Wolverine, he looks at Rogue as a younger sister. And so so he wants to make sure that she is okay. Now, when Rogue does walk into the room, it's a phone call for Wolverine from Nick Fury. And Nick tells Wolverine, I need you right now to meet me at this one location, so hurry up. Now, I kind of like what Robert does here because for Elliot, he's automatically thinking that he'll become part of the X-Men. Like, he's over here like, man, where my X suit at? What's our first mission? Like, am I really part of the X-Men now? And for Cyclops, it's more of, you just got here. Like, you just arrived. What are you talking about? Like, it'll take months for you, be able to join us on different X-Men missions. So for right now, let me show you a room, give you some clothes, and let's call it a day for now. But it's kind of like Robert hinting at there's something off about, well, Elliot. Now, I want to briefly jump back over to a conversation happening between Charles Xavier and Jean Grey, because Charles right now is saying how this opportunity is really great for Jean Grey to understand what's going on with her and the idea of the Phoenix, right? And so it's also Charles makes sure that Jean Grey does not call him Charles, that Jean Grey only calls him Professor. Like, he wants that easily established. But for Jean Grey, she finds that weird. And the reason why, because she believes that him and her are kind of, first name basis now. But it's Charles saying, no, we're not. But this new lady, Leandra, is on first name basis with you is kind of wild to her. But it's also Charles trying to kind of comfort Jean Grey and make her believe the best option is to try to at least allow the church to help her understand the true powers of the Phoenix. Now, for Rogue and also Iceman, we do see them right now currently in the Danger Room. Now, for a brief moment, when it came to Brian Vaughn's run on Iceman and Rogue, their relationship was just all over the place. They would date, they would break up. He'll then date Kitty Pryde, she'll then date Gambit, then Gambit dies, she comes back home, and then Iceman dumps Kitty for Rogue. It was all over the place. And around this time, Kitty Pryde had moved on to Spider-Man. So for Robert Kirkman, for me personally was him trying to really establish Iceman and Rogue are a couple. Now, it's also kind of felt like because what was happening over in the X-Men movies as well. Because in the X-Men movies, Rogue was with Iceman for the first trilogy, right? And so it kind of felt like they wanted that synergy in some kind of way. But when it comes to Rogue and Iceman, they kind of show off in the Danger Room, but really more her showing that with the powers of Gambit, she's really great with her powers. She now knows how to protect herself and other people like Storm. But getting back over the tour for Cyclops and also Elliot, when they walk into the hangar, they see that they now have a new jet given to them by the Church of the Shi'ar. Now, when the church arrives, their main goal automatically is to go over to Jean Grey and kind of help understand the idea of the Phoenix. Now, with that happening again over there, we then switch over to Emma Frost's school to kind of close on the first chapter. Because at her school right now, they're having a school dance. So Colossus went there because he is currently dating John Paul. And so those two dating, Colossus goes there, he sees Angel there, everyone's hanging out, having a good time at the school dance. Things go south very quickly. And the reason why, because the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants arrive. And so for Colossus, he already knows they need to call backup. That call goes over to Cyclops, who's still with Elliot. But once he does get that call, he tells Elliot, you're in luck, because it seems like you and I are on a mission together right now to help Colossus fight against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And just like that, Elliot's now part of the X-Men. Now, as we get into the next chapter, we're really getting into the idea of picking up with Nightcrawler. Remember reminded that for Nightcrawler, supposedly he had this crush for Dazzler. Now, Dazzler is currently in a coma at the moment because, well, she was stabbed by Lady Deathstrike. Now, the whole idea of Nightcrawler kind of going in this direction where he's having a crush on Dazzler is also him going in this direction where he's very upset about the idea of Colossus being gay. He feels like Colossus being gay, of course, is a massive sin, but also the idea that Colossus did not tell Nightcrawler about him, well, being gay. Now, getting back over to Cyclops and also Elliot, as they're waiting for the rest of the X-Men to arrive, well, for Cyclops, kind of surprised who does arrive. It's just Storm. Iceman and Rogue. Kitty Pryde is with Spider-Man. Wolverine left for a mission for Nick Fury. Nightcrawler with Dazzler. Colossus is already there. Angel has been kicked off the team, but technically already there as well. So right now, it's just a handful of X-Men who must head over there to hopefully deal with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, for Cyclops, he hates the idea of bringing Elliot, but it does seem like he has no choice. Oh, by the way, Jean Grey is also busy because, well, she's being interviewed by the Church of the Shi'ar. And speaking of the interview going on for Jean Grey with the Church of the Shi'ar, Jean Grey is on guard. And technically, she should be on guard because we have learned in the last video that the Church of the Shi'ar does have some connections to the Hellfire Club. Now, the Hellfire Club did break away from the church and kind of went their own direction, but still, there is that connection. And so for her, she's kind of wondering, what is the actual goal for the Church of the Shi'ar Empire? They're trying to bring utopia, but let's not forget, the Hellfire Club wanted to bring destruction. Now, for Leandra, she does tell Jean Grey that most likely on the 20th birthday of Jean Grey, she'll become the Phoenix full force and use the powers of the Phoenix to bring utopia across the entire universe. Now, they do get a small blood sample from Jean Grey. For a brief moment, we do shift back over to, well, the X-Men heading over to Emma Frost's school. Now, this again is Robert Kirkman kind of showing us a small sample of there's something going on with Elliot, because you now have Elliot being able to use his powers, really being control of his powers, and make an X-Men outfit for himself just like that. And for the rest of the X-Men, they don't find that weird at all. But once you do have the X-Men arrive at the school of Emma Frost, well, you have the students there begin to attack the X-Men. Now, the only reason why you have the students of Emma Frost attacking the X-Men is because they believe the X-Men are right now the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. You see, when it comes to Mastermind, he has the ability to play with your senses. And so right now, he's making our young heroes believe that they're now fighting against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but in reality, they're fighting against the X-Men at the moment. But getting back over to the interview that is being done on Jean Grey by the church, well, it's now asking questions like, what kind of visions do you see? Now, for Jean Grey, I kind of like this a lot because it's really more of us kind of seeing more of like, what's going on in her mind dealing with the idea of the Phoenix. Because yes, in the past, she has told us like she has seen things. She has seen some crazy thoughts in her head pop up left and right. But now it's the idea of her saying like, no, I've seen some crazy wild stuff to the point where like, I'm seeing things where I'm killing my boyfriend off. I'm killing my friends off, or killing Charles Xavier off. And so we're now kind of getting a better idea of like, her mind just going to different places left and right. But while you have that happening over there, the battle still continues on at the school of Emma Frost. Now, hear me out, because you do have the X-Men being able to win the battle against the students of Emma Frost. But now it's time for them to deal with the actual Brotherhood of Evil Mutants here. And so for our heroes, it's a whole new challenge, especially when it comes to Elliot. Now, this is Kirkman kind of showing how powerful Elliot can truly be when it comes to having full control of his powers. Because you didn't have, the X-Men fighting against the different members of the Brotherhood. The battle goes on. Our heroes are somewhat struggling, but all the focus right now is being shifted over to Elliot. Here's the reason why. Because Elliot is then able to push the Blob. Now that right there should not even be possible, but that really shows how powerful Elliot truly is right now when it comes to him having full control of his reality warping abilities. But as the interview goes on for Jean Grey, man, oh man, the interview goes like completely south. And the reason why, because, well, you didn't have the Phoenix kind of take over the body of Jean Grey. And so with that happening, it's kind of like, will Jean Grey, the Phoenix, now take full control of the body of Jean Grey and begin to attack the different people in in the room, starting off with Charles and Leandra as well. And so as we transition into the final chapter of the storyline, we're kind of getting into the idea of us seeing, the media arrive, the police arriving as well, and she'll be there in a moment. But as the battle goes on, our heroes are now somewhat struggling against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, while that battle's still happening over there, we switch back over to Jean Grey, or right now, the Phoenix, to be more exact, where it does seem like we're seeing the Phoenix has completely taken over the body of Jean Grey. Now, this is pretty huge because you didn't have, Jean Grey go after Lilandra first, but you didn't have Charles Xavier kind of step back into the room. Now, for Charles, he wants to go ahead and try to stop Jean Grey in her tracks. But the thing is, right now, the Phoenix has officially taken over. And so for Charles, his powers are not really able to stop Jean Grey if he really wanted to. That kind of shows how powerful she truly is. Now, Charles will stop her, but there's a reason why he's able to stop her, and it's not because he's more powerful than Jean Grey. And before we kind of see the actual reason behind that, we switch back over to the battle taking place right now for the X-Men fighting against the Brotherhood, because the battle does get wrapped up in this chapter right here, but really kind of shows as Elliot the star of the whole entire battle, because once you have Elliot find a different way to kind of stop the Blob, all the attention is now on him. Now, this is again another small hint kind of heading towards, Elliot. There's something off about him. And so it's Robert Kirkman saying like, hey guys, it does seem kind of weird to have a brand new character just joins the team and then be able to kind of star the team in a matter of like a few minutes. It's kind of strange, right? But we switch back over to Jean Grey. Because like I said earlier, the idea of Charles not really being more powerful than Jean Grey to stop her, the only way he does stop her, matter of fact, this will come up again in the Cable story arc as well, because you didn't have Charles beg Jean Grey to stop, right? But then you have Charles say, I love you. Now, that one line right there kind of changed the whole idea of Charles Xavier in this reality. I kind of felt like that really did bother a lot of people. And you'll see what I mean as we get into the whole Cable story arc as well. But you do have Charles being able to stop Jean Grey from killing off him and Leandra as well. And so with her mind being shut down, you did have the assistant to Leandra come back in the room, right? And when he does, it's him trying to clarify that Jean Grey is not the Phoenix. Now, right off the bat, you already know that's not the case at all. But what he's trying to say right now is with the blood sample they have gotten from her, it kind of shows there's nothing in there that really proves that Jean Grey is the Phoenix. But also is him trying to change the past of Jean Grey by basically saying that her parents were part of the church as well. So most likely for Jean Grey, she had heard stories about the Phoenix and now has like split personalities. So one personality being Jean Grey, the other one being, of course, the Phoenix. Now, this is them saying like, there's no way she's actually the Phoenix, but of course you already know that's not the case at all. And so when the X-Men comes home and you have Cyclone and see Jean Grey, she says, please, Scott, just leave me alone. Like, go away. Now, the reason why I say, of course, we already know that's not true at all when it comes to Jean Grey not being the Phoenix is because we kind of find out that he is part of the Hellfire Club in secret. So this dude was able to go undercover, get into the church to get close to Jean Grey to basically make sure that she is the Phoenix. And so he lied to Leandra in the church by saying that Jean Grey is not the Phoenix, but in reality, she is, because he's part of the Hellfire Club, trying his best to bring them back into the picture again. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men, we're going to pick up with the Magician story arc. Now, for me personally, this story arc is just okay. The next story arc, the Cable story arc, I'm really hyped to cover because for me, I love the whole idea of the Cable story arc being done when it came to Robert Kirkman on his run on Ultimate X-Men. Like, the first few story arcs were okay. The last few story arcs kind of like, okay, he's now officially cooking. But for right now, it's more like, let's go ahead and wrap up the whole idea of the Magician story arc. And so getting into issue number 72, we do pick up with Charles Xavier. Now, there was a storyline I did kind of skip over, but honestly, it's not really that important. So just in case you do get mad at me, like, why in the world, Fresh, did you skip it? It was a one-shot, like literally a one-shot that we told in like 4 or 5 minutes. And honestly, it didn't fit anywhere when it came to like me putting in one of the other videos it took place between. And so I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and skip it again, because honestly, it's okay. It's just Charles Xavier runs into a mutant known as Syndicate. And that's really it. And so we see him right now kind of making sure that Syndicate is being taken care of. But also for Syndicate, it's kind of like one of those secret mutants out there doing different things for Charles Xavier in the background. And that's really it for now. But we do see Charles get another phone call, but this time by Kitty Pryde's mother. Now, honestly, it's only one page here, but the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, because when it came to Kitty Pryde, let's not forget, when it came to Mark Millar's run, he basically had Kitty Pryde's mom tell Charles Xavier, I don't want my daughter doing anything dangerous at all. Now, of course, right after that, girl got put in the ringer with all the different things that the X-Men team has gone through in this series. And so it's her right to make sure that her daughter is okay, but also she heard that her daughter does have a new boyfriend. Of course, that would be Spider-Man around this time in the Ultimate Marvel universe. Now for Charles, he does promise her that her new boyfriend is okay. And also, her daughter's okay right now. She's not really doing anything dangerous, which honestly is not the truth at all. Because you have the X-Men and also Kitty Pryde right now fighting against the Friends of Humanity. Now, in the main Marvel universe, the Friends of Humanity, it's really more of an organization out there who is always trying to get rid of the mutant race, right? And so in the Ultimate Marvel universe, it's the same case all over again. Now, right now, you have this organization trying to attack a hospital. And the reason why, because, well, this hospital had decided to take in a young mutant and give that young mutant some medical help. And of course, for this organization, that's not okay at all. And so you have the X-Men right now stepping in to hopefully stop them. Now, it's also kind of showing off the different abilities of our heroes, but especially for the magician, Elliot. Now, I'll kind of dive a tad bit more in his character for the later parts in this video, just in case anybody forgot who he was. But when it comes to Elliot, better known as the magician, he has reality warping ability. So right now with the X-Men, they do have the edge over this organization. Now, things do kind of go south very quickly. And the reason why, because one of the members of this organization is technically a mutant, but it supposedly had no idea that he was a mutant, but he does kind of like go in this Hulk-like form and begin to go on a rampage. But I want to go ahead and switch over to Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because for Nightcrawler, we have to remember that he began to get this crush on Dazzler. Now for Dazzler, she was stabbed in an earlier storyline by Lady Deathstrike. And so she has been in a coma, but now she's officially waking up from her coma. And so the first person she does see is Nightcrawler, but it's also her wondering like, where are the rest of the X-Men? Now, this is just another step that is going to lead into, I say, the downfall for Nightcrawler. We're also kind of given another reminder of Jean Grey. And the reason why, because for the last story arcs, really last few story arcs of Ultimate X-Men, we have saw like small glimpses of Jean Grey turning into the Phoenix. In the last video, we had learned about the actual origin of the Phoenix in the Ultimate Marvel universe, but it's also the idea that by this point, we can say Jean Grey is officially the avatar of the Phoenix. Now again, we have seen small episodes of Jean Grey turning into the Phoenix, like our last video, and so for Charles Xavier, he was barely able to stop her, and so for right now, he's kind of keeping Jean Grey away from the rest of the X-Men to kind of make sure that she can be safe around the rest of the X-Men. And for Jean Grey, she kind of hates that, but we also kind of see her talking to these goblin-like illusions that are all around her at the moment. But I want to go ahead and switch over to Robert Kirkman's new character, the Magician, because by end of story arc, he'll go away forever. But right now it's him again showing off how powerful the magician truly is, because he has reality warping abilities. He is almost unbeatable. And so we see him being able to bring down this Hulk-like character, again, who's a mutant, and bring him down kind of shows the rest of the X-Men like how great he truly is. And for Kitty Pryde, Homegirl is beginning to fall in love with him. I've been saying this over and over again, right? Like the downfall for Magician, downfall for Nightcrawler. Like I'm gonna say it a few more times in the video, guys, so sorry. But when we do switch back over to Charles Xavier, he realized Nightcrawler has been gone a lot for the last few moments in the X-Men timeline. And right now, the entire team on a mission right now, but here's Nightcrawler. And so for Charles, he's kind of wondering what's going on in Nightcrawler's mind. The thing is, Nightcrawler does not want to talk to Charles. Now, put on a hold real quick. And the reason why, because we have Nick Fury walk in the room. And with Nick Fury walking into the room, this begins to break down the entire plan that the Magician had. And let me explain, because when we saw the Magician in the first story arc, it was him kind of going out of his way to say like, hey, you know what? I'll create illusions around me where I'm fighting against Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. And you have S.H.I.E.L.D. being able to capture him and then bring him over to the school of Charles Xavier. Now, once that happened, it was Nick in his illusion saying like, hey, Charles, this guy right here is a young mutant who cannot control his abilities. Can you help him? And Charles said yes. Some time passed by, and here's Nick right now saying like, hey, Charles, I want your new kid on my team, the Ultimates. Now, for Charles, he's kind of confused. He's like, what do you mean? You gave him over to me to help him. You just can't walk in and say, you know what? Now on the Ultimates. But for Nick, he has no idea what Charles is saying, because he's like, dude, I never heard or saw this kid until last week on the news. So I have no idea who in the world are you talking about, because there's no way I walked in here and gave that kid with that kind of power over to you. And so for Charles kind of wondering what has been going on, but things get even crazier, because Nick also says, by the way, I had already talked to his parents. They're okay with him joining the Ultimates. But for Charles, kind of like, wait, when you did come here, supposedly, you also told me that his parents were dead. And so now it's them realizing that there's a possibility the X-Men have been played by the Magician. And so this leads into the second chapter of this storyline, where now we're seeing really more of the X-Men heading back home out of their mission fighting against the Friends of Humanity. Now, on their way home, Charles does call up Cyclops, because by this point, Nick and Charles already know there's something going on when it comes to Elliot, aka the Magician. But back at the school of Charles Xavier, it's Charles and Nick kind of being like, okay, so we can officially say that we got played, right? Like we can sit down and officially say that most likely what happened was he had used his powers to make illusions, but also alter our minds to allow him in the school and then also become a member of the X-Men. Because again, in the last story arc, it was Elliot getting a tour from Cyclops. And then out of nowhere, you had Elliot go on the first mission in a matter of like hours. And then being able to bring down the different members of the Brotherhood just like that. So it's Charles now kind of wondering, his powers are also playing with the minds of different members of the school. I truly do love this one page right here. And the reason why, because it's like Jean Grey becoming very comfortable with the idea of the powers of the Phoenix. And when it comes to Robert Kirkman's run, I can say for my own self, I love what he did with Jean Grey and the Phoenix. Unfortunately, he was kicked off the book right after like the Apocalypse story arc. But once we do switch over to the X-Men, when they do arrive back at the school, it's Charles and Nick just straight up calling out Elliot saying, we know about you. We know that you have been playing us. We know that you've been using your powers with our minds left and right here. We know everything that is truly going on with you. Now, of course, you didn't have the different members of the X-Men right now begin to attack Elliot. Now, for Elliot, it's him right now trying to use his powers to just
evade all these different attacks, but also he wants to explain himself. But you know how it goes in Marvel Comics. The heroes are to sit down and talk. They have to fight first and talk later. But I want to go ahead and switch over to Dazzler. Which honestly, I have no idea why I said that, because when we do switch over to Dazzler, it's the staff at the hospital right now realizing Dazzler is gone, that somebody has taken her. And of course, I get the idea that it has to be, well, Nightcrawler, right? But getting back over to school of Charles Xavier, we're now getting into like the ending of this chapter. And for me, it's a beautiful ending because you have the magician right now just being able to take on every single member of the X-Men. But then at the very end, it seems like they're basically helpless, that this man's going to win. Even though he's also still trying to explain himself, you have Jean Grey walk in. When she walks in, nah, it's her right now trying to use the powers of the Phoenix. And for me, it's kind of like a beautiful shot, but also kind of showing like, oh yeah, we're now entering the Phoenix Jean Grey era officially now. And so getting into the final chapter of today's video, it's really more of us just seeing, Jean Grey versus the Magician. And I love this battle because it doesn't really show Jean Grey just automatically winning. Because even though she has the powers of the Phoenix, she's not full control of the power of the Phoenix just yet. But also, the Magician is a reality warping being as well. So it's kind of like, hey, they're toe-to-toe, but also like the Magician knows how to distract her long enough. Now, she also frees Wolverine. And with the idea of Wolverine being free, it does kind of give her that edge. But we also see him kind of use some illusion, creating like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutant illusions. But I love the idea of this battle. Now, for me, there is one part I don't like. Because for me, Ultimate X-Men really does focus more on Wolverine and all the different members of the X-Men, except like Jean Grey, Charles, and like maybe occasionally other people. But Wolverine does kind of get a lot of focus. And so once again, it's him being that hero, and he does stab the Magician. Now, we're kind of left to believe the Magician is dead. And matter of fact, it's Charles saying like, it does seem like he no longer exists at all in the world. Now, the next following day, he's then confronted by Kitty Pryde. Now, with him being confronted by Kitty Pryde, it's really more of him kind of saying he's not still in full control of his powers. And that part right there, it's really important. And the reason why I'm saying that, because it's him kind of realizing that his powers kind of did things for him and try to give things that he wanted or possibly needed. And so sometimes he was in control, but other times it wasn't him. It was his powers doing different things for him. And so it's him saying like, I'm happy my parents aren't dead. I'm happy with the idea of at least joining the X-Men. But I want to let you know, like, I didn't go out of my way completely to do this. My power is still out of control. But once I kind of realized my plan was falling apart, I knew the next part of my plan was to make you guys believe I no longer exist. Because I knew that even if I just disappeared, Charles will try his best with all his resources to hopefully find me. And so it's him telling Kitty Pryde, you guys will never find me. And I'll make sure it stays like that. And he disappears. But he also makes sure that she forgets they had this conversation. Now, we're also given another page here where it's only more Wolverine reminding us that he hadn't given the ring that belonged to him or his wife. And the thing is, he still has no idea who his wife is. But Sabretooth's outside the school, and we're still kind of wondering, is there a possibility Sabretooth could be the son of Wolverine? Or there's someone else out there who could be Wolverine's son? Now, for Nightcrawler, again, we're kind of getting closer and closer to the downfall to Nightcrawler. Matter of fact, the annual #2 for Ultimate X-Men really does show the downfall for Nightcrawler, because it's him right now kind of just leaving the school completely, right? But it's also him expressing his anger towards Colossus. Now, his anger towards Colossus is really more the idea of like, you're gay, and how wrong that is in Nightcrawler's mind, and also his religion. But the story does kind of end on the note where we really do see, Charles Xavier having another date with Leandra. And the date kind of goes where it's more him explaining that he has been studying the religion of the Shi'ar, but it's the two of them getting very close. And the book does kind of hint at the note where the two of them might go have some fun alone. But with that being said,
Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Ultimate X-Men. But here's the thing, because we're going to cover the annual today's video. And the annual really does focus more on Nightcrawler. And really, I've been kind of hinting at this since our last few videos, ever since Robert Kirkman had officially taken over the X-Men title. And so with him kind of being the person in charge of Ultimate X-Men, it's also him kind of writing, not kind of, it's him writing this annual. And again, it's the Downfall of Nightcrawler. And you see what I mean as we go through today's storyline, because as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we really do pick up in the past. Now, we saw back in Volume 2 when it came to Mark Millar's run on Ultimate X-Men that Weapon X had a few mutants under their control. Wolverine, Rogue, Nightcrawler, Juggernaut, Sabretooth, there were a few characters. Now, we're right now seeing Nightcrawler being on a mission right now, killing off someone for the American government. And the reason I'm kind of pointing this out right now, because it's the idea of Nightcrawler, right? Being part of Weapon X. We already know when it comes to Wolverine, what Weapon X do to someone's mind. And so for Nightcrawler, being forced to use your powers in an evil kind of way to kill off people can truly do a number to you. And so we're kind of left to believe here that maybe being part of Weapon X may have done something to the mind of Nightcrawler, which of course could affect him right now in the present day. But now we kind of have to go back in time. We do pick up with Rogue, and I kind of realized something. And you'll see as we go through today's storyline that you have the book kind of focus more on the different characters who were affected by Weapon X. Because for Rogue, again, she was part of Weapon X as well. But for Rogue, she had left the X-Men right after the Cry Wolf storyline. She left with Gambit. Now, he died literally moments after, but while he was dying, they kissed. And so while they were kissing, she had begun the process of absorbing his powers. Now, it was a major change for her character. And the reason why, because her power didn't cancel out and she was the new Gambit. And honestly, that's why I kind of like Ultimate X-Men, because it did kind of bring some new ideas to the X-Men title. Because again, the idea of Rogue no longer being Rogue, that now she had the ability to be somebody else. She now had the ability to be with Bobby Drake, her boyfriend at the time. And so it's her kind of realizing that those powers are now slowly slipping away. And for Charles, he kind of feels like her time is coming up very soon. That sooner or later, she'll no longer be the new Gambit. She'll now go back to being, just good old Rogue. Now, this does kind of transition into the idea we saw in the earlier story arc. I want to say the last video where Daz was in a coma for being stabbed by Lady Deathstrike, right? Now, when she woke up, the first person she saw was Nightcrawler. The scene kind of ended at that note right there, right? But now we're kind of seeing what happened exactly after, where you had Nightcrawler kind of go out of his way to grab her and teleport it away. So just like that, we now officially know that Nightcrawler had kidnapped Dazzler. Now, we kind of saw in an earlier story arc that he had admitted that he had feelings for her, that he liked her and wanted to be with her. And this leads into us seeing that mental state of Nightcrawler, because now we're seeing it's really more of Nightcrawler, not mentally well, but also he's lying to Dazzler, because when it comes to Dazzler, she wakes up right now in a cave and it's Nightcrawler telling her the X-Men has been attacked. We're all in hiding right now at the moment right now and waiting for Charles Xavier to contact me and let me know when it's all clear to come out from hiding. And now we already know that's not the actual truth. That is Nightcrawler right now trying to keep Dazzler all to, himself. Now, the next person to be interviewed is Wolverine, but this right here does take place in the present day. And so again, like I said, all the different characters truly being focused on right now were all affected by Weapon X. And so when it comes to Wolverine, I feel like it's Charles asking Wolverine about the idea of killing Magician. Because for Wolverine and the rest of the X-Men, they truly do believe that Wolverine stabbing Magician, it may have killed him or his power out of control to the point where he no longer exists. Now, we already know that's not the case. For Magician, he made sure they believe that he's officially gone. gone and out of their lives, as a way to say hidden from them. And so when it comes to Wolverine, it's him saying like he's not okay with killing, but he knows that sometimes you have no choice. You have to cross that line to kill somebody to protect the ones that you care so much for. But at the same time, it kind of feels like those people out there have been killed by him, things could have came out differently if they had just talked and listened to one another. But we do kind of switch back over to Dazzler and also Nightcrawler, right? And when we do, is Nightcrawler still kind of making her believe that, okay, the X-Men were attacked by somebody, we don't know who, and right now we're all in hiding, waiting for Charles to give us the clear. Now, is Nightcrawler and Dazzler being able to spend some time with one another? Now, when she grabs his hand, it's really more her saying like, I like you as a friend. I love the idea of having you in my corner. But once she says that, but also kind of implies the idea that she still has feelings for Angel, for Nightcrawler, his hope and dreams get crushed right there because he still has feelings for her, but he realized he may never get her because she has feelings for Angel. Now, for Charles Xavier, he has been informed about the idea of Dazzler missing. And so with Dazzler missing, it's him talking to the entire X-Men team except for Nightcrawler. Because with Nightcrawler, he has been gathering things and bringing things back over to Dazzler. And so when he walks by the briefing, he's kind of like, hey, what's going on? Like, why is everyone right now in this meeting? And they informed him like, hey, Dazzler is missing. Now, right off the bat, Charles, Wolverine, they know that something is going on when it comes to Nightcrawler, but he's trying his best to play it off, but he really can't play it off. And so while you have Nightcrawler walk away, Wolverine said, I think Elf Boy here had taken Dazzler. And so you did have the X-Men being able to follow Nightcrawler over to his hideout. You have Kitty Pryde go in, grab Dazzler. The problem is that you have Dazzler talk as Kitty Pryde takes her away. And so for Nightcrawler, he knows, one, that Dazzler is gone, and two, he knows the X-Men right now involved. And so this leads into a big battle. And so when it comes to this battle, I really do want to focus more on watching Nightcrawler go up against all these different X-Men characters, but let's not forget, he especially has a lot of hatred towards Colossus, because for Colossus, in this reality, he's gay. And so it really did bother Nightcrawler a lot, but also the fact we're seeing that Rogue has now officially lost her powers as well. So for Rogue, she's no longer able to throw her cards like Gambit does. She's now just a regular mutant again, not regular, but her whole power set. And so as the battle goes on, you do have the X-Men being able to find a way to stop Nightcrawler, to finally bring him back home. But this leads into the idea of Dazzler officially leaving the X-Men, because you have Charles right now trying to have a conversation with everyone about trying to get the best help for Nightcrawler. And the best help right now is Charles. It's not S.H.I.E.L.D. But for Dazzler, it's the idea that he kidnapped her. He lied to her. He had this weird thing about her and it kind of went out of control. And so for her, it's not okay at all that Charles right now is trying to, in her mindset, downplay it. Now, it's also her looking at Jean Grey and other members of the X-Men who kind of went through some different situations. And for Charles, he had downplayed all those different kind of problems, or for Dazzler's mindset. And so for Nightcrawler, it's another mutant, another member who has done something really major and going to downplay it. And so for Dazzler, she's now officially off the X-Men, just like that.